Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. The trip of a lifetime. The trees are so much bigger out here, I said, as I looked out the passenger side car window. We were driving from the airport in the cab we just got. The lady driving was rude. She barely even looked at us. But we're out of there, and officially on vacation. The flight was long. I tried to sleep, but the man next to me was a talker. I'm too nice, my girlfriend says, but that's what keeps the world a better place. Besides, the man kept buying me drinks, which is why I'm looking out the window. I might hurl, "And greener, this place is beautiful," says Kenny. We're finally in the Pacific Northwest. Our bags are packed, and we're headed to Mount Hood. We have a week out here, and 4 days spent in the mountains. Kenny has family out here, so we're staying with his aunt the first night, and then we're off to breathe that crisp forest air. We made it to his aunt's house. She was so warm and welcoming. I felt right at home. After a nice meal of homemade beef stew and a shower, I was ready for bed. I bid them good night, and off I went, fast asleep in no time. I woke up in a panic. The room unfamiliar. Where am I? I thought, as my senses start to adjust. There's a soft buzzing coming from the fluorescent lights above me. My arms and legs are secured to this hospital bed, it seems. But this doesn't feel like a hospital. It's too cold. I try to move my head, but that's secured too. "Hello?" I call, but no answer. "Hello." Again silence. Suddenly a man is standing above me. He covers my mouth as I go to scream once more. "Shut up! They'll know you're awake. And then they'll make you forget. You mustn't forget. It's not safe. Run!" Something pokes me, and I'm out again. I awake in bed, extremely well rested. It's 6 a.m. What a crazy dream, I thought, as I smelt the coffee. I jump out of bed and run to the kitchen, where Kenny's Aunt Gloria is standing in her long silk lavender-colored nightgown and matching slippers. She seems so frail, yet strong and intimidating at the same time. A soft smile forms as she bids me good morning. "Ken's not up yet, but you're more than welcome to join me for some bean water," she says with a chuckle. I follow her outside to the patio, The air is fresh and moist, the coffee warm and delicious. You can see the sun glisten off the morning dew as the birds sing their welcome to the day. It sure is nice of you to let us stay here, I say. Kenny and I have been planning this trip for a while now, and I'm so excited it's finally happening. You two boys, be careful out there. I hear stories all the time about hikers going missing in those woods. These aren't like the mountains you have on the East Coast. These are real mountains, inhabited by really big creatures. I'm sure you've heard of Bigfoot. She says. I chuckle. Ha, Bigfoot, please. He's just a myth. If Bigfoot is real, then I hope I see him. He'll take a photo and become rich. Gloria shook her head and looked deep into her coffee, almost as if she was trying to see the bottom of her cup through the black liquid it now held. Like I said, just be careful, please. It's now 10 a.m., and we are on our way to the mountain. Gloria let us use her car since she doesn't drive anymore. She's 75 now, and hasn't driven since she was 70, and got lost driving home. They found her a day later, parked in a parking area 15 miles from the house. We made it to the mountain after about 2 hours of driving, and we couldn't wait to get on the trail. As we loaded up our packs, Kenny and I discussed our route, where we would stop for water and lunch breaks, where we would camp, and which streams we will pass, so we know where to collect water when we get low. All said and done, the trail up and down the mountain shouldn't take more than 3 days, but we're taking it slow since we haven't done a mountain of this caliber before, so we planned for 4 days. We're hiking Timberline Trail. It passes 3 major landmarks and has snow runoff year-round, so finding water shouldn't be a problem. In total, it's just over 41 miles. We're all loaded up and ready to start our hike when I realize I left my trekking poles at the airport. They must have fallen out of my pack. Just find a stick on the hike. It'll serve the same purpose, says Kenny. I mock him, but I know that's what will happen. Easy for you to say. You didn't forget anything, but he did. The compass. Well, how are we supposed to know where we're going now? I ask. We still have a map, and the trails are marked. It'll be fine, he says in a not-so-reassuring voice. We've been walking for hours, and I haven't seen a single soul. It's day 2 in the woods. The first day went by so fast, but now the excitement and newness has worn off. The woods are long and damp, flora as far as the eye can see. No roads, cars, people. Hey, are we on the right path? I ask. Yeah, we should be coming up on Cloud Cap in about 5 more miles. Ken responds. I don't believe him, though, and my body hurts. It must be from sleeping on the ground. and I kept having the dream about the guy telling me to run. Maybe that's just making me paranoid. There, see? I told you we're going the right way. That must be Cloud Cap Inn, exclaimed Ken. As I stumbled over the hill, I saw what appeared to me as an abandoned shack in the middle of the forest. I don't think that's it, I yell, but Ken was already sprinting towards the front door. I call first shower, he yells as he enters the doors. I approach the building cautiously, examining the weathered cedar shakes, the broken shutters hanging from the windows. How is this place still in business? I thought. I push open the heavy oak door, and inside, the place looks immaculate. It's an open floor plan with 2 massive fireplaces at either side of the room. The carpet covers the hardwood floor, and drapes cover the windows. I look to the front desk. It's the man from my dream. I told you to run, he says as a loud bang comes from the room upstairs. Kenny screams, bang! Then silence. I run as fast as I can up the stairs, skipping 4 steps at a time. I take a left. The hallway goes on forever. Which room did it come from? Kenny! I yell as I'm racing down the hallway. I hear no response. Kenny! Again, nothing. I ran downstairs, and there's no one around. The doors are locked, and I can't get out. I try for a window, but they're boarded up from the inside. I ran back upstairs and tried those windows, but to no avail. I'm trapped. But how? Why? Just as I ask this, I hear a noise coming from the stairs. I turn around, and there I see it. Kenny's body, 2 gunshot wounds. It must feed, says a voice from the other end of the room. I turn to look. Gloria? Bang. My knee is on fire. I cry out in pain as the creature appears. I look into its bright yellow eyes, soulless and empty. Its teeth big and sharp. Lips stained with blood. Why Gloria? Because I love him, she says, as she points the gun straight at me. And he loves me. Bang! I fall to the ground. The world seems blurry. I see the smoke coming from the barrel of the Smith & Wesson. I see Kenny stand and take the gun from his aunt. Just as my eyes close for the final time, I should have ran. The end. Storm Emmett. TW Death of Humans and Animals. Storm Emmett, from her elevated position in her fishmonger shop, Kellen could oversee the town, the harbor, and the storm beyond. She pressed Pa's binoculars against the shop's rear window and studied the waves in the English Channel, churning as though they were being stirred within a giant cauldron. Darkened clouds blotted out the sun, giving the impression that it was night rather than the middle of the afternoon. A lone fishing trawler plowed into a gray wave. in a desperate attempt to reach the shelter of the harbor. The lights of the vessel flicking in and out of view. Feeling a pang of pity for the crew of the trawler, Kaylin turned her attention to the harbor. The beach was invisible, submerged beneath the waterline. The storm ripped a garish flag, depicting a cartoon sun wearing sunglasses, free from the ice cream kiosk on the seawall, and tossed it into a breaking wave. The few vessels in harbor, with any exposed fabric rippling in the wind, strained at their mooring lines. As the trawler rounded the seawall and entered the limited safety of the harbor, Kaylin glanced over her childhood home. So far, the storm had stripped most of the aerials from their rooftops and had collapsed half a dozen chimneys. But there would be worse to come. She could remember when Port Carrick had been a quaint fishing village, most well known for its natural harbor, and later its Victorian lighthouse. She glanced at the lighthouse, now considered a Grade 2 listed building, as the ship skirted by its base, and wondered what the Victorians and the generations before them would have thought about this storm. Kellen glanced out the shop window and at the cobbled street that wound its way down to the harbor, decided it was unlikely she would receive any customers, and bolted the door. Although she had become nose-blind to the smell of the fish, she had yet to grow used to the countless, lifeless eyes watching her from shelves of ice. She failed to suppress a shiver. A warm shower would raise her spirits and provide an excuse to return to her novel afterwards. Something rapped at the door. Kellen jumped. A yellow mass that looked pixelated behind the frosted glass peered inside. Hello? Who is it? The figure was wearing a yellow Macintosh, and something gray was protruding from their face. The owner of the coat was stooped over, casting a shadow through the glass. Hello? She said again. The figure rapped on the door with a gloved hand. Kellen heard the person speak, but their words were lost to the wind. Their Cornish accent, however, was unmistakable. Ernest, is that you? Kellen unbolted the door. Ernest stumbled inside, his rain-sodden boots leaving puddles on the floor. Christ, you kept me out there for long enough, didn't you? He muttered as he lowered his hood. Kellen spotted rainwater dribbling from the man's beard. Couldn't see who it was, she answered, closing the door. Ernest unzipped his coat, and Kellen saw he had failed to change out of his fishing overalls. They clung to him like a second skin. Were you up on the coastal path? Or was that you coming back into the harbor just now? Kellen asked. Ernest mopped his face and offered her a toothless smile. As he did so, Kellen glimpsed the Ernest she knew. Growing up, the smiling man telling stories on the harbor side. Now his smile seemed forced, almost desperate. We were fishing. It isn't safe. Is it safe to go out in that? Kellen asked, turning the thought, spoken by the voice of her pa, into a question. We've been out in worse, Ernest said. Kellen decided not to question this lie. Can't imagine you caught much in this weather. They were saying on the news that the storm keeps growing over Cornwall. No end in sight, they said. We caught plenty. I've never known us to be so lucky before. The fish must love the weather. Best haul we've had in years. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. He held up an object wrapped in brown paper. I wanted to show you this before it goes to market tomorrow. She watched as Ernest placed the package onto the counter and began to unwrap it. Cod, he announced, and stepped away. Kellen examined the fish. Its mouth was ajar. Its dull silver skin was flecked with tints of orange. Right, she said. It'll go lovely with chips, I'm sure. What's... It has fangs. What? Look. Ernest stuck his index finger into the fish's mouth and peeled back the lips. 2 teeth. So large, Kalen could have called them tusks, protruded from the fish's lower jaw. She failed to suppress a gasp. It looks like a vampire, Ernest said with a dry chuckle. What's caused that then? Dunno. Might be a freak of nature. Vampire cod. Is there such a thing? Anyway, I wanted you to see it. That's all. Unless you want it. Kellen considered this, but the fish would only be useful as a party piece. Not that she attended any of those. No, she said. Keep it. Put it with the rest of your catch. Or better yet, have it for your supper. Clearly disappointed, he hadn't raised as much excitement as he had hoped. Kellen watched Ernest wrap up the fish as though it were a Christmas present. You coming down to the market tomorrow morning, buying your wares? Yeah, Kellen said, before the Emmets get out of bed. Mind you, Storm's keeping most of those away anyway. Like rats, Ernest said, zipping up his coat. Plague rats. Or leeches. Coming down from London and the like. No, don't you tut. Your pa would agree with me. They're bloody running us out of our own home. Kellen wasn't sure if the remark had been aimed at her, but knew her pa wouldn't have agreed. He had loved the tourists, the lifeblood of Cornwall he had called them, and would often preach that without them, the county wouldn't be as prosperous as it was now. It had been his idea, although he hadn't had time to implement it, to send the fish to London via train rather than selling them locally. It was essential to keep the shop afloat. She wondered what he would think of the storm. I'll see you tomorrow, Kalen said, before Ernest could speak, and closed the door behind him. Kellen woke the following morning exhausted. The storm was anything but. On her walk down to the market, she was surprised to find that her shop had remained undamaged, while the rest of the village had not been so lucky. Both the primary school and New Town Hall had been struck by lightning, leaving blackened, scorched marks on their roofs. More chimneys had been felled, in addition to several dozen roof tiles. The content of the village's drains had spilled out onto the streets. 2 builders were arguing at the base of the lighthouse, beside a van containing building supplies, their argument turning into a brawl as she passed. Kellen hurried on, after learning Ernest had already left for another day's fishing and placing her order. She returned to her shop and continued her novel until she spotted a yellow figure hurrying up the hill that evening. Hood lowered against the rain. "Got another one," Ernest cheered as he entered. Kellen placed her book onto the counter. "Another what? Cod with fangs?" "No, but similar." Ernest opened the brown parcel in his hand and dropped something that looked like congealed jelly onto the counter with a splat. Kellen snatched up her novel. "Is that a squid?" she asked, studying the array of tentacles. "An octopus," Ernest beamed. Kellen stared at the dead creature. Its bulbous head swayed from side to side like a king cobra. Tentacles lay out in every direction across the counter, which was now covered in a layer of salt water and ink. Kellen poked at one of the lifeless suckers. "It's wrong," her pa's voice said. "Unnatural. You don't get octopuses off Cornwall," she said. "You do sometimes. Very rare, though, and never this big. But look, it has an extra arm." "What?" Kalen counted. "Oh my God, a 9-armed octopus," she muttered. "I've never seen the like." "Wrong," her pa's voice said again, filled with a sudden sense of revulsion. Kellen took a step away from the counter. "It's that storm," Ernest said. "It's brought all sorts in. We're making a killing out there." As he spoke, Kalen heard a distant crash and felt the ground tremble. She suspected that a tree had blown over on the coastal path. "Did you hear that?" But Ernest hadn't seemed to have noticed. "I might donate it to the RNLI station, see if they want it on display. Or the new town hall, maybe? If there's anything of it left standing after the storm. I saw the bloody mayor having a right go at some of the repairmen just now. Proper waving and shouting, he was. The builders were going on about some Celtic graves they were told to dig over or something. Should have called in some specialist, they were saying. I don't know. Anyway, we brought some more fish in, me and the men. We're going to do a night fishing trip, so there might be more fish for you to buy tomorrow. Unless, of course, you want to send it up to those fancy hotels in London. That's what they're saying down in the market. That we're not good enough for you. That's where the money is, Kaylin explained. But Ernest had started ranting again. Your pa, if he could see you now, would be disgusted. Do you know that, girl? He would have been sick. Although Kellen had spent her childhood in this building, she had never worked in it. Now she wished she had paid more attention when Pa was discussing margins and cost-cutting measures. He died. She had returned from London, discovered she had inherited the shop, and felt the weight of his legacy land across her shoulders. It was his idea, Kaylin began. A traitor against your own home, running up to London. Listen, Ernest, I don't want your octo. Ernest snatched up the dead creature, bundled it back into the parcel, and fled the shop. Kellen, wondering if storms could affect human behavior in the same way it could affect animals, bolted the door behind him. Just in case, when Kaylin opened the shop the next morning, she saw that the cobble street outside had been transformed into a miniature river. A brown torrent of water washed its way down the coastal path, round the street, and disappeared towards the harbor. Hurrying up the flooded street, waving his arms, was Ernest. Swearing, Kaylin snatched up her coat and left the shelter of her shop. "What are you doing?" she shouted, as Ernest continued to stagger towards her, his arms spinning to maintain his balance. She felt the rain penetrate her shirt and shivered as droplets ran down her spine. "If you fall, you'll be washed away." "Beach," Ernest answered, pointing down to the harbor. "What?" Ernest's mouth moved, but only half the sentence reached her. "Washed up on the beach." The wind stole his words, and the hammer of the raindrops was so loud that the sound created reminded Callan of white noise. "What is? What's on the beach?" Kellen thought she heard the word whale in his reply, but couldn't be sure. "What's on the beach?" she asked again, bellowing over the wind. "Everything. Fish, crabs, debris, the lot. The tide has brought tons of stuff. Everyone's helping themselves." Kellen peered down at the harbor through the sheet of rain. The occupants of the village were sprinting, some wading, through the flooded streets and towards the coastline. Ernest offered out his hand. "Come on, before all the good stuff is taken. You can find something good to sell, help your pa's sinking shop. Don't go to the beach." "No, Ernest, wait. Stop." Kellen watched a flicker of irritation pass over his face. "What? I don't think this is a good idea." "Why not? It's free. The bounty of the sea. Ain't no law against it." Kellen shook her head and took a step back towards the shop. "Pa said we should always respect the sea," she said, but knew, as soon as the words left her lips, that it was a feeble defense. "You ain't got no spine," Ernest spat. "Your pa would recognize opportunity when it came. If he were still here, that shop would be doing fine, wouldn't it?" He turned and staggered his way back towards the harbor. Kellen stumbled through the water and to the shelter of her shop. Snatching up pa's binoculars, she scanned the beach. The lighthouse light washed over the sands, illuminating the scrap metal and shards of wreckage. Kellen wondered if they had come from a shipwreck, but then noticed that some of the debris was moving. Fish flopped helplessly in the sands as crabs attempted to escape the waves. Maybe it has been a fishing trawler. It hadn't been Ernest's ship. She could see that in the harbor, and no other ship had dared to leave the shelter of the seawall. Her gaze fell on a chunk of dull metal nestled on the edge of the beach. She shrieked when the metal rolled over and opened its mouth. She couldn't hear the animal's screams, but she could imagine them. The whale calf slapped its tail against the rocks, but remained ignored by the villagers as they searched for salvage. Kellen waited. The clouds were as black as tar, and the sea the same color to match. After an hour, she decided that a giant wave would not appear to wash the villagers away. Likewise, a sea monster would fail to materialize. Kaylin, still wrestling with the knot of dread in her stomach, continued to watch the ignored whale calf as its movements slowed and ceased. The humans passed around the carcass, either oblivious or uncaring. "It's what the storm wants," her pa's voice said again, and no matter how much she tried, she couldn't ignore him. "It's what the storm wants." Kellen spotted Ernest's ship leaving the harbor. The lighthouse began to lean. Ernest's ship disappeared under the collapsing tower and was replaced by a silent plume of water. The plume turned into a wave and began to advance. Kellen screamed. The beach vanished in an instant. The marine life reclaimed. The sea wall broke within seconds. Moments later, the harbor was destroyed. The ships at anchor swamped or cast aside as though they were children's toys. The occupants of the village were washed away, their screams stolen by the wind and salt water. The RNLI station was submerged from view. Kellen, fully realizing how pointless it was, bolted her shop door shut. The roof of the new town hall crumbled, disappearing behind the row of cottages. The wave charged up the cobbled street, the debris carried in its flow, striking the remaining homes like shrapnel. Kellen closed her eyes and thought of her pa. The wave reached her shop door, paused, and receded. She opened her eyes to see the water retreating down the hill, flowing back into the harbor, and breaking upon the remains of the seawall. The rain had stopped. The clouds had drifted away. Port Carrick was silent, as was her pa's voice. Paranoid delusions. The wind buffeted him wildly, and the rain hammered down relentlessly. He was walking near the local creek, which was connected to the suburb's storm water drains. But this particular area was just rocks, shrubs, trees, and water. Hastily, he made his way down to the muddy stream, which, at this time, was pitch black, and stepped into the water. This would be a sort of baptism. He descended into the water and dunked himself in it. It was too shallow to cover his entire body, so he splashed some water onto his head. Now he was ready for whatever this night held in store for him. As he ascended the side of the creek, he saw before him the well-trimmed grass soccer field, lit by down lights on the large steel poles surrounding it, and began to stagger in its direction. Soon, he was standing in the middle of the field, wet from the downpour. He felt alone. Not physically alone. There were cars going up and down the road next to the field. But as far as he knew, nobody knew he was out here. But strangely, he saw someone approaching in the light. It was a middle-aged man. Thunder boomed across the field. "What are you doing out here?" "Best to be truthful. I'm waiting for the world to end." "Have you come to join me?" Lightning lit up the sky. "Yes, I'm out here for the same reason." They both turned and looked at the houses, whose steel back fences met the side of the field. "Do you think we're the only ones who know?" The rain belted down on them both. "I think so." The thunder from the lightning rumbled heavy and hard, as more great arcs lit up the sky, and the rain became heavier. The man looked at him through the gelatinous downpour. "How did you get here?" he replied in a frantic rush. "I've been walking through this night down many different paths. I honestly couldn't tell you how I got here. I just kept on walking. Eventually, I hit the creek over there, and then I came to this field. The wind battered them, causing the rain to hit them in an angular fashion, directly on their face." The man came up to him, soaking wet, and put a hand on his shoulder. "Tell me your name. We need to pass the time somehow." The rain began to subside, and the wind became calmer. He responded, "My name's Jack. Who are you anyway?" The man looked at the ground, his hand still on his shoulder. "I'm David. Tell me everything you know about why you're here. Tell me everything you know about the world ending." He sat down, and the man sat with him. "I left my car when the radio started sounding funny. Just got out and left it where it was. It wasn't just the radio. I felt like the car was going to lock me in any second. I walked and walked, and when I got to some shops, I heard people laughing at me, but I just ignored them and opened the Bible. I was sitting on a concrete barrier, and the pages just started to turn, slowly at first, but then faster and faster, till it stopped at the book of Revelation. Ah, the book of Revelation, the prophecy of the end times. But don't you think that maybe it was just the wind? Jack's face tightened, and his teeth gritted. "It was a sign. I know a sign when I see one." A loud thunder crack shook the earth. He began to pace back and forth, and then turned to face David, his voice trembling despite his efforts, words spilling out too fast, fingers twitching against the damp grass. "The end of the world is when God returns his Son, Jesus, back to the world to judge everyone. Everything great we have built, all the technology we have created, it won't make any difference. Everything will be destroyed to be remade again. All the wicked will be sent to hell, while those who believe will be given new bodies and will live forever with God, Jesus, in their midst." "I see," said David. "I'm not going to debate your beliefs with you. I respect your choice. But tell me, what made you think it's happening right now?" He began to pace again. "It started as a feeling. I was feeling so amped up, and then I saw the pages turn on my Bible, and then this crazy storm started happening, and I've had this horrible feeling, like 1,000 people are watching me at once. If I close my eyes, I can almost see them looking at me. And then, when I was in my car, I heard people singing my name. I don't know why they were doing that. Maybe they want me to think I'm special, so I'll think I am the Messiah. But I'd be a false Messiah, so I can't let them control me," David replied softly. "I can see there is a lot going on for you. Let's break this down. So, the storm made you feel more alert, more vigilant. The way you said it before, it was as if your feelings created the storm. But don't you think the storm might have been what, in your words, amped you up, and not the other way around?" The wind became gentle. He continued, his voice calm and reassuring. "And the feeling of being watched. This could be paranoia. Many people who become paranoid feel they are being watched. And when you heard people singing your name, are you sure that's what you heard? Do you think maybe you misheard? Or perhaps you're hallucinating? In any case, you left your car running in the middle of the road. I hope it hasn't been stolen." His shoulders slumped. The clouds were clearing, and a few stars were visible through the soccer field lights. "Everything you're saying could be true. But if I can't trust my own feelings, how can I know anything? I'm a Christian. I believe God can talk to me. Is God deceiving me?" Silence descended upon them, with only a faint breeze gusting back and forth. David smiled. "Listen, I respect your beliefs, and I'm sure that there is something in those beliefs that allows for God to communicate with you in certain ways. But let me tell you something." He opened his wallet and pulled out a card. "I am not actually here for the end of the world. I'm here to find you. I'm a psychologist in the public mental health care system. Your parents have reported you missing. And I'm here because your phone allowed us to track you. That might sound like a breach of privacy, but believe me, it's in your own interest. Right now, I believe you are mentally unwell, and I want to help you. Look at the both of us out here, soaked from head to toe. I need you to follow me over to my car so we can take you somewhere where we have medicine that can help calm you down. It's going to be hard at first. The medication isn't perfect, but if you keep taking it, you will get used to the side effects. And then things like this won't happen again. Hopefully." He looked down, wondering at everything he had just heard. "How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know you're going to take me somewhere and torture me? You know the world is filled with people who hate Christians. How do I know you're not a Satanist and part of a plan to make me lose my faith?" Tears began to fall from his eyes. "I believe that God can get me through anything. But honestly, I don't know if I could hold up under torture." The wind began to pick up again. David's face took on a look of empathy. "All I can say is that I promise I'm here to help you. If God is going to communicate with you, it will help if you're thinking straight. And that's what we're going to try to do. Help you to be able to think without succumbing to delusions and paranoia. I've seen many cases like yours, and I really do feel for the people we treat. Will you come with me?" He felt a sense of resignation. All right, I'll come with you. Though the ground was soaked, he could feel the firmness of the earth beneath his feet. The two of them walked off the field. The air was now completely still, and crickets could be heard chirping in the night air. The vale bloom. Elwyn absorbed the gentle coastal wind as it caressed her face from where she sat within the moors that lined her village. Stray wisps from her plaited, brown gold-streaked hair broke free as it was picked up by drafts. Distant sounds of the nearby market where she worked were a pressing reminder that she had stolen extra minutes to escape work duties. The red knitted hat protecting her ears played tug of war with the increasing gusts that rippled through the purple heather as she ran back towards the busy village, only looking down to ensure she did not step on any wildlife going about their day. Without warning, a darkness encroached the sky, and a slow, thick mist curled around the young woman's path. Elwyn became a static pillar of fear, watching the tendrils of mist reaching out and parting the heather, beckoning her to change her path, unable to sense beyond the darkness that strangled out the rest of the world. Elwyn tensely focused her vision on what the dark magic revealed. Something was glowing intensely. Elwyn tenderly progressed her nimble feet, feelings of fear and interest arguing with one another. She came upon a ruby-red thorned bush, isolating an intense, majestic amethyst glow beneath it. A faint whisper trickled into Elwyn's ears. The bramble peeled itself, exposing the velvet, petaled, regal-like flower bud, glistening with crystal dewdrops. "The tide obeys the moon," a female voice sang, prompting the rose to bloom fully before Elwyn's widened eyes. "But not all who guide you wish you to sail true." Before she could repeat the phrase in her head, the darkness sank away into the moors, leaving no trace of its sudden presence. The purple rose remained in Elwyn's hand for only a second before she carefully stuffed it into her pocket as voices came booming from the village, indicating that she had indeed been away too long. Looking and finding no traces of the encounter, she fled for the market. As Elwyn approached her father's stall, she could hear murmurations from the fellow tradesmen. Shouting orders came from customers who bartered prices on fabrics and fresh fish. "Did you see the weather change?" Elwyn hastily asked as she removed her hat and jacket, messily placing them onto the upturned veg crates in front of the stall. "Never mind the damn weather. Get peeling these damn carrots for supper." He tossed a knife to Elwyn and kicked an empty bucket next towards her feet. He was only strict from the grief of losing his love and their newborn daughter in childbirth in recent years. Frustrated, Elwyn perched herself on a stool and began carving at a carrot stump. Even if she told her father, he wouldn't believe her. The rugged orange skin tumbled into the bucket between her feet as her eyes fixed with intrigue on the powerful purple rose that seemed to glisten from the adjacent pocket. "It's a veil bloom, if you were wondering," came a voice full of wisdom and assurance from the front of the tent. Elwyn glanced up to see a tall, thin, yet toned male figure bent over, perusing at the cabbages. His eyes pined towards the purple veil bloom, peeping out of the brown jacket pocket. The flower's quiet, luxurious vibrance seemed out of place and would surely be noticed by a knowing collector's eye. Elwyn glanced quickly towards her father, hoping she would not be heard. But he remained engrossed in organizing the stock in the back of the tent. "What do you know of them?" Elwyn stopped peeling and fixed a softened stare at the male. Her wide eyes probably revealed too much as she hoped for answers. Had she been cursed? She submissively looked toward the flower, phantom feeling its hard thorns against her fingers. "Only what the legend states," Vaska answered. "It's like finding a four-leaf clover. Just lucky." He picked up a cabbage and placed it under his arm. "My name is Vask. My family own a stall on the outskirts of the village. In my spare time, I am not ashamed to say that I am an anthophile." Vaska took out a small pocket-sized leather sketchbook. He opened it to reveal small flowers pressed neatly between the pages, each one secured with a small bit of clear tape. Elwyn tentatively leered over to see sprigs of lavender and small bouquets of daisies married together. Between parchment, she returned her eyes to Vaska. His emerald eyes cut sharp against the copper curls that framed his softened jawline. "I am only interested in where you found it, to satisfy the curiosity of a collector." His eyes flashed to meet hers. "I found it in the moors," was all Elwyn offered, indicating that if Vaska was to hold the cabbage in the crook of his arm any longer, he was to pay for it. Embarrassed, he hastily put his hand in his pocket to search for payment. Bringing out 2 silver coins, he placed them on the wooden trade table that bore the produce. "Thank you," Vask smiled as he grabbed 2 more cabbages. "Keep the change, and if you are into books, come by the stall tomorrow." He kept Elwyn's stare as he retreated into the market crowd. "Boy!" shouted Elwyn's father. "Are we getting supper tonight, or do I have to finally skin the cat?" Her father was stood holding up the rear tent flap, peering in with disappointment. Startled, Elwyn kicked the bucket back between her well-worn leather boots and continued to scalp the skin from the carrot, stealing glances at the veil bloom in wonder of its true intentions. The next day, Elwyn laid out the vegetables onto the wooden trade table as her father stacked the emptied crates from behind the tent. After a night of being plagued by the whispers and visions of dark forests, she desired to know more about the veil bloom. The blood-red thorns pressed into the inner lining of her coat pocket, the tips seeping through to the cotton of her work dress, nipping at her as she moved. Glancing down, she could see the rich velvet petals, longingly looking back up at her from within, deep in her coat pocket. She rubbed her thumb over the veil bloom's soft middle. The tightly gathered corolla gently ticked the pad of her thumb. "I'm just going to get a new recipe book," Elwyn called to her father. Before he could battle her decision, she broke out into a purposeful stride. Her jacket rippled against the cool air as her arms straightened through the sleeves. She pulled her collar to secure herself against the chill, weaving in and out of tradesmen setting up their stalls, unsure of the faces that surrounded her in a familiar setee of work. She kept her head low, turning on her heels and accepting defeat, trying to find Vaska. Elwyn began to walk back to the southern area of the coastal market. Smells of fresh fish and spices began to fill her nostrils, reminding her stomach of its emptiness. "I found it," called a familiar voice. Vaska appeared in her eye line as she paused to see him run back into his tent and return with a large, tatted book. "Veil Bloom." Vaska turned the book towards Elwyn as her hands held the edges to support its weight with him. Located in lands of enchantment, it amplifies one's desires and strength, even with madness. Vaska laughed gently as he impersonated a person riddled with madness and unbalance. Elwyn rejected the book by letting go of the worn-down leather edging and taking a step back from Vaska. "It also says it sings lullabies, which probably explains the bit about going mad." Vaska coyly laughed. Elwyn's face turned to deep thought at the young man, voluntarily helping her. "I don't desire anything." She paused, wondering if giving him the whole story would favor her or not. "What does it say about lullabies?" Her voice almost a whisper. The emerald in Vaska's eyes began to swirl with intrigue as he gestured for them to go somewhere quieter to talk. The pair sat cross-legged underneath a large oak tree situated on the outskirts of the market. Elwyn's face buried in the book of hidden blooms, each page so thin almost translucent, gently flapped between her fingertips. It says in the legend that if the flower starts to glow, you become more powerful. Vaska added, as he looked deeply into at the island of dense forest on the horizon. Isolated by small ocean waters, the enchanted, banished lands leaked darkness. His soft curls caught the wind, his eyes in a thoughtful trance. Elwyn shuddered at the thought of the flower's magic ending up in the wrong hands. "I should get back," Elwyn decided as she stood up, ready to face the wrath from her father upon her return. Elwyn woke suddenly, in the dead of night. Sweat dripped from her brow, her long, brown, damp hair that clung to her neck. "Help us," came a faint whisper. Elwyn held her breath as she looked around for the voice's owner, the vile bloom, picking it up by its thick green stem. The ruby-red thorns pulsated as she brought it closer to her ear. "Help us, Elwyn." It eerily beckoned, suddenly, moving images as if they were her own memories, flooded her mind. She could see a vast forest, that crawled with amethyst-colored smoke. A fawn emerged in the clearing, eyes wide with terror, trembling as it proceeded to lie down on the dark moss floor. Elwyn had feelings of blood rushing back to her limbs as she regained consciousness. Her mind lingered with a defiant message. The banished lands needed her help. Her head swiveled around to the oak tree beyond the market border, to see an elbow bent from behind it, as if someone was sat down with their back to it reading. Elwyn gingerly walked over to them, hoping the white cotton shirt belonged to Vaska, and not someone who would alert her father or challenge her in any way. Reassuringly, Vask sat with the heads of bluebells crowded on the bend of his knee as he pressed them into his sketchbook. He looked up to see a panic-stricken Elwyn. "What's the matter?" His face matched her concerned look. "The veil bloom showed me something," Elwyn bleated softly under her breath. "I don't know the meaning of the vision or the dream," Vasquez started, after hearing the story from Elwyn. He stared again at the island of trees isolated by small ocean waters, wondering if the legend is true of the banished lands. "If we go there, do you think we will die?" Elwyn asked with hope of a good answer. Vaska didn't respond. He continued his longing stare towards the banished lands. "I just know that this dream felt more real than any other I have had," Elwyn continued. The fawn seemed terrified, not of me, but of something I don't think I could see. "I think we should try to help it." Elwyn removed the veil bloom from her pocket. Its petals had begun to wilt at the edges, curling in as if it were ready to die. "What I have done?" Elwyn softly asked herself under her breath. Had she stayed in the market that day, she wouldn't be having nightmares caused by florals. "I don't think it's something that you have done," Vaska replied, as his eyes glinted with what seemed like excitement. "I think it's more about what you could do to help." Once they beached their stolen rowing boat amongst the cold brown sand on the shore of the banished lands. The atmosphere hung heavy as life drew to a whisper, and then to a flat silence. "What does your love of flowers tell you now?" Elwyn asked Vaska, with a tint of amusement at the moss-strangled rocks that decorated the forest floor. Not even the twigs beneath their feet made a noise as they progressed deeper into the darkness. "Nothing yet," Vaska gently replied, as they descended deeper into the towering forest. Elwyn tripped on a rock, twisting her ankle slightly. "Careful," Vask panted, as he grasped a hold of her elbow, prompting a powerful vision into Elwyn's mind, causing her to spiral in between memories, not her own. A hushed murmur echoed in her ears as she saw sights of a large wolf with emerald eyes stalking and hunting on the outskirts of the forest. As if unable to enter, beyond the first row of trees, many moons passed in the sky as it returned night after night. A clear voice embedded deep in Elwyn's veins. The tide obeys the moon, but not all who guide you wish you to sail true. The vision of the wolf disappeared into smoke, shifting into flurries of flashbacks. The first time she met the veil bloom flower, the look in Vask's eyes, as he also saw it for the first time that day in the market. As if he pined for it, she remembered. The book thrust into her face that day in the market, as if Vaska knew she would come looking for answers. The veil bloom let out a breath, glowing intensely in agreement. Elwyn had not realized she was now holding it, squeezing it in her paper-thin hand, seething from an anger rooted deep within. He had led her there, purposefully, knowingly. "Help us," came the wispy echo. It repeated with each turn, louder than the last. More voices adding into the chorus of pleas from wildlife. Elwyn fell to the floor as the visions and voices ripped away from her, breathless and her mind aching. She looked up to see Vask's face of worry. "What did you see?" he hastily asked, his face tense with pressure. Everything." Elwyn tried to continue when a creature in the clearing approached. A fawn. An amethyst smoke seeped in from behind the fawn, encasing everything in its wake in a building chaos. Turning to face the fawn properly, Elwyn could see the thick smoke tendrils once again clearing a path, this time around the fawn, who was whimpering, but showing a quiet strength trying to stand. Elwyn had seconds to think. She turned to Vask. His emerald eyes were gleaming with anticipation at the flower as he turned toward her. "It's working," came Vaska's voice, a rasp with a hint of excitement at the veil bloom glowing intensely. He snatched it from her fingers, contorting his body in obsession and glee. He threw his arms in the air. "I am the most powerful!" But only silence sounded over the whirring mists. Elwyn felt a burning in her veins. Her body acted automatically as she turned to face Vaska, her back to the trembling fawn in protection. The veil bloom turned to ash in Vaska's trembling hand, his face mad. Auburn curls bounced around with every frantic move he made, searching for the bloom. He turned to see Elwyn, her arm outstretched in retaliation towards him. A push at his shoulder from an invisible force turned his face from confused to pure rage at seeing the veil bloom reforming itself in the powerful young woman's pocket, siding with her instead. "Clever girl, but I don't need you," Vaska hissed. "Just the veil bloom now that your kind heart woke it from slumber." His teeth began to form into sharp fangs. His face shifted into a recognizable wolf with emerald eyes. He lunged for Elwyn, jaws agape in blind fury and jealousy. Elwyn darted to the side. A fire of purple light erupted through her veins, streaming out from her fingertips into the wolf's beastly body, knocking him backwards. He steadied himself and leaped high into the air to plant another attack, aiming true to Elwyn and the glowing veil bloom. At once, she coaxed the power from the veil bloom, causing the ground to quake against the sheer force. Gripping against the weight of the power, she lifted and hurled a fatal blow towards the wolf, smashing his limp body against the strongest and tallest trees. Elwyn panted as she looked at the purple illuminations in her veins trickle out and into the fawn behind her. She looked up at the wolf, but only to see his body disintegrate into smoke and disappear into the sky. An escaped curse. Elwyn ran to the fawn, hoping to help it to live, to answer its plea. The soft curve of the fawn's head cupped Elwyn's hand, opening its eyes tenderly. The land around awoke in harmony. The fawn gathered to its feet, bowing proudly to Elwyn, as the gentle black nose touched the floor. A sweep of purple brushed through the land. A once cursed land started to return to life as animals crept out of deep burrows and birds took once again to the sky. The fawn transformed into a majestic stag, concluding the awakening of the misunderstood lands. His aura glowed in the same pearlescent magic that once flowed through Elwyn's veins. She looked down to see her bare arms and back to the stag, who nodded at her before bouncing off into the thriving atmosphere. Smiling, Elwyn knew her calling now was back to her grieving father. She could never leave him on his own. A thorn dug into her side. The veil bloom remained in her pocket, clasped tightly in a sleeping bud. Its messages sang deep in Elwyn's head as she stroked its velvety casing. It was the flower's magic that gave her the power to connect and calm the land. But it was her kind heart that ultimately saved them all. In the alley, you never know when or exactly where I, the destroyer, will strike. I respect no one, people, animals, houses, or possessions. Hear me roar as I approach. Dark clouds and sky announce my coming. Witness my violence. Trees fall, glass shatters, puny man-made cars flip over, roofs are ripped off, light poles are bent. There is no stopping me. A storm is coming, Mitzi. I can feel it in my old bones, Gladys Moore said to her cat that morning. Better turn on the news to see if the weather people know anything. Gladys had lived in Grand Island, Nebraska all her life. No stranger to storms, she knew what to do and had ridden out several during her lifetime with only major yard cleanup. She wasn't that worried. She had a cellar, but she hadn't met an F5 yet. Mitzi vigorously licked her ears. Inside the canal, pressure was building. Far away in the distance, her sensitive hearing picked up a rumble of thunder. She raced around the kitchen, her fur standing on end and her tail puffed out. If her person knew what was good for her, she would slide underneath the bed soon. Well, that is, if she would fit. Rusty Booman heard the news. Same county, same general vicinity. "A twister is headed our way," Rusty yelled at his brother, Charlie. Clothes and shoes were jammed on. A camera was slung around Rusty's neck. The back screen door slammed. Charlie gunned the Chevy farm truck as dust and gravel flew up behind them on the road. Rusty switched the radio on and listened to the newscaster. "Turn toward Alda," he said to Charlie. Just then, his phone began flashing. "This is the emergency warning system. Prepare for tornado near Alda and Grand Island." Charlie peered up through the truck window at the sky, where greenish-gray clouds amassed. A stiff wind whistled through gaps in the insulation around the truck's doors. Suddenly, the gale held its breath. The eerie silence momentarily chilled the simmering excitement of the young men. Charlie pulled to the road's shoulder. "This is it, Russ. Get the camera ready. Our names will be all over TV when we get a close-up picture of the funnel coming down. They will say something like, 'Young storm chasers capture tornado touchdown,' and we'll be famous." They jumped out of the truck, and Rusty adjusted his camera's f-stops. Later, what was actually said was, "Young storm chasers killed near Alda." Their pickup truck lay in the ditch next to the road. Who knows what happened to the camera and the pictures? They were never found. "Foolish young men," says the destroyer. "But there is no law that says that people can't be idiots. They got a warning. Even looking at the signs in the sky should have told them I was imminent. No remorse on my part." As soon as Gladys saw the darkening expanse above her house, she put on her sturdy shoes and hung a whistle on a chain around her neck. She called her neighbor, Torrance Fielding. "You headed for shelter?" she asked. "Need anything?" "Yep. Going down to keep the spiders in the basement company. Got everything I need. You?" "I'm fine. Just got to sit it out." Her tornado safety list was checked. Food, warm clothing and blankets, a flashlight, first aid kit, her meds, and water. She put Mitzi in her carrier with a soft cloth on the bottom. After several trips downstairs with supplies and her beloved cat, she closed the basement door behind her. A transistor radio would give her news. She put on her bicycle helmet, lest something hit her in the head, well away from the small windows. Gladys planted herself in a chair with Mitzi on her lap. Mitzi hated being confined and restless. She squirmed and meowed. Outside, the wind rose and shrieked and howled like a possessed animal while they waited and waited. Fear shivered down Gladys's spine. Then a silent lull, somehow more frightening, like the storm was gathering strength for its next onslaught. The house began to shake. Hail rattled down outside like bullets. She covered her head and Mitzi with a blanket. Slam, bang. They could hear wood splintering, objects falling and crashing to the floor above them. Paint cans plunged from the basement shelves, and some ruptured, spattering the cement with color. A suffocating pressure bore down on Gladys's chest. Rising dust made her cough. Her heart pounded, and her breath came in gasps. Panicked, she yanked the covering off herself. Bright flashes of light could be seen through the shattered window panes as the tornado passed over them. Debris from outside whooshed in through the broken windows. Mitzi attempted to claw her way out of her prison, but Gladys held her fast. Had hours passed? Again, an ominous hush after the storm had passed over them. But Gladys sat still for minutes, squeezing the carrier against her shaking body. Mitzi let loose a yowl. "We're safe, sweetie." "We made it." Slowly, Gladys stood. Her shoes crunched over broken glass, blown clear across the floor. Avoiding the paint puddles, she grasped the handrail with one hand and climbed the stairs to the door leading back into her house. It would not open. She jiggled the handle. Nothing. She set Mitzi down on the stairs and pushed her weight against it. Wouldn't budge. No way could she crawl out those dinky basement windows. Anyway, she'd be cut to pieces. Wasn't there a hammer down here somewhere? Yep, it had fallen from its perch on the pegboard. My strength isn't what it used to be. These doors were made solid. Not such a great thing right now. She kept hammering without much result. Sweat rolled down her face. She should be glad she'd survived, but now being trapped was scary too. Mitzi wasn't helping. Her plaintive cries grated in Gladys's ears and made her more on edge. She set her weapon down and rubbed her forehead. To her surprise, her fingers came away bloody. When had she got injured? Now it hurt. But when she looked down, her eyes rested on her whistle. She blew with all her might, while Mitzi flattened her ears. Hours later, when Torrance was able to exit his own house, which had been flattened by the big oak in his yard, he hurried to Gladys and heard her now faint whistle. He shook his head in wonder. One wall with a door stood. Otherwise, her house was a pile of rubble. "I hear you, Gladys," he shouted. "I'm going to get you out." The destroyer laughed as he barreled down the countryside, wreaking devastation as he went. Even the people like Gladys, who planned ahead, aren't completely safe from me. I demolished her house. She's homeless now. But like others, she might rebuild. Spawned by a thunderstorm, I'll gather strength again soon and plunder this same area. Crazy people. There's a reason why they call it Tornado Alley. The drought. Summer died 50 years ago, and autumn never came. The sky was a hard shell of endless blue, unbroken by clouds, as if God had dipped his paintbrush in cobalt and forgotten to rinse it out. Heat waves shimmered off the asphalt like restless ghosts, and the air tasted faintly of burnt rubber and dust, the stale breath of a town stuck in time. Cedar Ridge had always been small, a thumbprint on the back roads of nowhere. There were farms, of course, though most had dried up and blown away with the last real rain. What remained were brittle corn stalks, blackened and skeletal, standing in neat rows like mourners at a graveside. The few farmers left mumbled about drought-resistant crops, but spoke of miracles with the same dry hopelessness they reserved for paying taxes. Rust scabs bloomed on the water towers, and the gas station on Main Street had stopped carrying windshield wiper fluid years ago. No need for it when the sky never wept. They still sold beer, though, and on days when the heat pressed down like a fist, the townsfolk gathered in the shade of the Sinclair station's green dinosaur sign, cold cans sweating in their hands. It was there, leaning against the faded scales of that prehistoric beast, that Tom Weaver saw the stranger for the first time. The man came walking up the road from the south, where the horizon quivered like molten glass. He wore black, a suit crisp as a knife edge, and carried a battered leather suitcase in one hand. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but there was something unsettling about him, even from a distance. He didn't stumble or waver in the heat the way normal men did. His stride was steady, purposeful, as if he carried winter in his pocket. "Ain't seen a salesman in years," muttered Earl Granger, wiping sweat from his forehead with a grease-streaked rag. "What the hell's he sellin'? Coffins?" The man chuckled, low and uneasy, but Tom's beer went sour on his tongue. Something about the stranger's silhouette made his skin crawl. The sharp angles, the way shadows clung to him like cobwebs, even in the brutal sunlight. The man in black reached the edge of the group and tipped his hat politely. His eyes were a pale, icy blue, startling against the deep tan of his weathered face. He looked like someone who'd walked a long way and hadn't found what he was looking for. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Mighty warm today, isn't it?" Earl snorted. "Been warm every damn day since Truman was president. What's it to you?" The stranger's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I'm just passing through. Thought maybe you fine folks could help me with a little business matter." Tom narrowed his eyes. What kind of business? The man set his suitcase down with a soft thud. The latches gleamed like silver teeth as he flicked them open. Inside, nestled against dark velvet, were rows of gleaming vials filled with liquid that shimmered like captured moonlight. "I sell weather," the man said simply. There was a beat of stunned silence, followed by a bark of laughter from Earl. "Weather? You gotta be kidding me. What's next? Bottled air?" The stranger didn't flinch. "Rain, snow, a cool breeze on a summer's day. I've got it all. Guaranteed to work or your money back." Tom stepped closer, curiosity prickling beneath his unease. He peered into the case, mesmerized by the swirling colors. One vial shimmered with iridescent blues and silvers, like the reflection of moonlight on water. Another glowed a fierce, fiery red. "How much?" Tom asked before he could stop himself. The stranger's lips curved into that unsettling smile again. "For you, sir? A bargain. One memory, freely given." Tom blinked. "A memory? Just a little thing," the man assured him. "Something you won't miss. In exchange, I'll give you enough rain to fill your fields for a season." Earl spat on the ground. "This is bullshit. Come on, Tommy, let's get out of here." But Tom's heart was pounding. He thought of his farm, the cracked earth, the dying crops. Thought of his wife, Ellie, who hadn't smiled in months because she knew what was coming. The bank foreclosure, the auction, the slow death of everything they'd built together. "What kind of memory?" Tom asked hoarsely. The stranger's eyes gleamed. "Oh, just a small one. Perhaps the taste of your first kiss, the sound of your mother's laughter. Nothing important." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Deal." The man in black extended a gloved hand, and Tom shook it. The air shimmered between them, and for a moment, Tom felt a strange, dizzying tug deep in his chest, like something had been gently plucked from inside him. When it was over, the stranger handed him a vial filled with shimmering blue liquid. "Pour this over your fields tonight," he instructed. "And remember, the bargain is sealed." Tom barely heard him. His mind was already racing with visions of green fields and heavy rain. That night, under a sky still stubbornly cloudless, Tom stood at the edge of his withered fields. The brittle corn stalks rattled faintly in the dry breeze, a chorus of death. His hands trembled as he uncorked the vial, the shimmering blue liquid catching what little starlight there was. The scent hit him first, clean, sharp, like distant lightning and wet pavement after a storm. It was a smell he hadn't known in years. Taking a deep breath, Tom tilted the vial and let the liquid trickle out. It splattered onto the cracked, dust-hardened earth with a faint hiss, vanishing almost instantly into the thirsty ground. He watched, breath tight in his chest, waiting for something, anything, to happen. At first, there was only smoke, thick and suffocating. Then the earth shuddered beneath his feet, subtle as a heartbeat, but growing stronger. The low, primal growl of thunder rolled across the sky, distant yet powerful, like some ancient beast awakening from a long slumber. The wind shifted, cool and damp, carrying with it the promise of deliverance. A single drop splattered against Tom's forehead, cold and startling. He blinked, hardly daring to believe it. Another drop, then another, until the heavens opened with a sudden, furious roar. Rain came down in sheets, wild, relentless, drenching him in moments. The smell of wet earth rose around him, rich and intoxicating. Dust turned to mud beneath his boots as rivulets of water carved new paths through the parched ground. Tom threw back his head and laughed, a raw, unhinged sound torn from somewhere deep inside him. He spread his arms wide, welcoming the downpour like a sinner at baptism. Water slicked his hair to his scalp and dripped from his chin, but he didn't care. His laughter mingled with the storm, defiant and joyful. The fields drank greedily, the dead husks of corn softening, straightening, as though waking from a long nightmare. Leaves unfurled, vibrant green bleeding back into lifeless stalks. The transformation was swift and almost magical. A resurrection right before his eyes. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under a pale new sun. Tom stood at the edge of his fields, now lush and vibrant, the corn standing tall and proud, shimmering with droplets of water. The air smelled sweet, alive. The screen door creaked, and Ellie came running out of the house, bare feet splashing through puddles. Her face was radiant with disbelief, tears mingling with the remnants of rain. "Tom? How?" she gasped, her voice breaking with wonder. He didn't answer. Words seemed pointless. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, fierce and grateful, as if sealing a promise between them. For the first time in years, Cedar Ridge felt alive, and hope, long buried beneath drought and despair, bloomed anew. The stranger returned a week later. Tom saw him standing by the gas station, his black suit immaculate despite the mud that clung to everyone else's boots. He knew, deep down, that this was no coincidence. "What do you want?" Tom demanded, his voice rough. The man's smile was razor sharp. "Just checking in. How's the farm?" "It's fine. Better than fine." "Glad to hear it." The stranger's eyes glittered. But you see, Mr. Weaver, memories are tricky things. Sometimes they're connected in ways we don't expect. Tom frowned. What are you talking about? The man tilted his head. Tell me, Tom, do you remember your wife's name? Tom opened his mouth, then froze. A cold dread crept up his spine. He could see her face clearly. Her bright eyes, the curve of her smile. But her name was gone, slipped through his fingers like water. No, Tom whispered, horror dawning. No, that's not possible. Ah, the stranger said softly. A shame. But as I said, a small thing. Nothing important. Tom lunged at him, but the man in black was already walking away, his silhouette dissolving into the shimmering heat. The rain never came again, and neither did Tom's wife. At least, not in any way that mattered. She was still there, smiling and talking. But her name was a hollow echo in Tom's mind, forever lost to the drought. And so Cedar Ridge, baked under the unchanging sun, its people haunted by what they'd forgotten. Warm tea, but odd aftertaste. The overgrown azaleas, camellias, and kudzu-covered trees engulf my grandmother's old country house with its petite porch and large windows. Perfume from the spring garden swirls around in the late morning air. After knocking on the door, my Aunt Arlene opens it slowly, and the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls escapes from the faint teal door. By the looks of the house, Arlene has not kept up appearances, nor simple maintenance. The paint's peeling, boards broken on porch, and even shingles missing from the roof are major issues I calculate in my first 5 minutes here. My aunt inherits the house after Nan, my grandmother, who died under questionable circumstances. Come in, my sweet boy, Aunt Arlene says as she waves me in. I'm so glad you came. I haven't seen my Aunt Arlene since my father's service. She hardly spoke to anyone there, and her reasoning is it's her only bother, and losing him meant she is all alone now, even though I'm still here. It causes her such great pain she didn't even come to the reading of his will. For Christ's sakes, it was just me, for my mother passed away from breast cancer 3 years ago, and my grandparents died about 15 years ago. So I am the only other family she has. She shuffles across the vestibule towards the front sitting room. The morning sun bakes the overly stuffed room. Please have a seat, my dear. She motions towards a chair near a coffee table. Then she sits across from me on a satin love seat. Underneath the sugary sweet smell of rolls lies a stale, almost mildew stank that stings my nose. The coffee table has stacks of mail and smut novels, along with a sterling silver tray with tiny teacups, sugar dish, and dessert plates. Over the fireplace, cobwebs blanket the matching pair of candelabras. With with a trail leading to dancing figurines, which are broken in this place and that. "I'm sorry about your father," she says, while her jowls jiggle among a slit mouth. She brings up a handkerchief to the corner of her lips. Her head and hands shake a bit, as if she's strung up by marionette threads and the puppeteer isn't paying attention. "I'm sorry as well. I know you and Dad were so close," I add. When I adjust my khakis pants, a loud pop comes from the chair cushion, so I gently lean back with my hands on my knees to avoid moving again, just waiting for the chair to cave in. Aunt Arlene straightens her lace collar on her well-pressed dress, like she didn't hear the my ass breaking the chair. "You know your parents always wanted to give you a little sister, but I believe your mother only wanted a girl she could dress up in fancy little dresses." Arlene sighs. She tinkers her dainty gold watch on her wrist. It's so small, I doubt she could even read it. This place seems to have paused the minute my grandpap died. Even the grandfather clock in the corner, which keeps eternal hands at 10 and 2. I don't know how old my aunt is, but when I was little, I would pretend that she was like 110. She carries herself all hunched over, with gnarled hands that look like they don't even open anymore. The hair she keeps in perfect curls tight to her head, with the typical old lady hat adorning the top with the matching gloves. She is defiantly older than my father, by 20 years at least, because the endless griping over his birth. Aunt Arlene would have been an only child if it wasn't for him. Then, being a boy, my grandparents adore him and spoiled him to no end. When they became adults, he was given the family cattle ranch along with the larger homestead. But as I said before, they didn't completely write out Arlene. I just don't think they trusted her to manage the business. Her anger got the better of her one time, and she threatened my dad that she would get her share by any means. "So how are things going?" "Good, I guess. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to take over the ranch, though," I said. "Well, I can understand that. You're still so immature to have such a large responsibility over so many people and money," she says with tight lips. My eyes about popped out of my head, and how can she sit there staring at me as if that's not an insult? "You know that I've graduated with a master's in agricultural sciences with a BS in business. And not only that, I've worked for Dad since I could walk. I've spent the last 3 years working on networking and research to increase production." I can feel my face boiling red, for Aunt Arlene knows all of this. She constantly interferes with my dad's decisions to include me in any of the family business. She clears her throat. "It's one thing to wrangle calves down in front of a crowd to impress young farm girls. It's another to manage $1 million cattle ranch with trucks and employees. I'm still not sure why your father didn't place me on the executive committee. I mean, at least until you're old enough to make managerial decisions. The ranch hands don't even trust you yet. And some bits of paper isn't going to get you respect in this field. She claps her mouth shut. My chest tightens, and I feel like my head is about to explode all over this ugly antique rug. Deep breaths. Take deep breaths. I run my hands down my face and squeeze my eyes shut. My Aunt Arlene has always been like this, though. She believes we didn't run the ranch how Grandpap wanted, and he would be disappointed in my dad. I just want to tell her, then why the hell didn't he give you the ranch instead? The grudge she holds against my dad seems to have gone to the grave, which is a damn shame. Well, Arlene, my dad has already proven. Ringing came from the kitchen. She promptly stood up. I've baked us some goodies, my dear boy. She gave me the oddest smile. She locks her heavily wrinkled eyes to mine, which appear to be shiny, then smiles with every single tooth. Her stare sets into my soul, but breaks when a whistle from a kettle starts. As she turns to walk toward the door, she twirls on her toes, as if she is floating across the maple floor, and disappears. I hear clanking of china and spoons coming from the dark hallway. Then oven door opens and closes. Why don't you help me for a second? She bellows. As I get up from the chair, the spring bounces back into place with a crack. I shake my head. I'm not sure why I came. I wander down the damp hallway towards a swinging kitchen door that looks like a portal to another world. Here, she hands me a small carafe. Could you please add some milk to this? She plates the pan of hot rolls onto a floral china platter. Can you carry the milk and teapot for me? There's too much to juggle here. She turns and vanishes from the kitchen. I try to follow her, but my knuckles are burning just a bit from the side of hot teapot. So by the time I make it back to the sitting room, she is ready to hand me a place with a cinnamon roll on it. How do you like your tea? She asks. But before I can say, she starts humming Old Rugged Cross. I decide to change seats, for I am certain that the chair is on the edge of collapse. I like a little sugar. No milk, I answer, while dropping into the love seat. She clinks around the serving tray, mixing the teas. Here you go, my dear. She smiles again, passing me the cup and saucer. Is there a reason you asked me here? I'm kind of busy dealing with all this stuff with Dad, I said, while taking a sip of dark tea. It hit really strong and bitter, almost like eating soap. I couldn't help but to screw up my face and swallow hard. Well then, down the hatch, I held my breath and sucked the rest of the cup. I didn't think you could screw up tea, but there's always a first. So here's to the cinnamon rolls for being better. I hold it up as if I'm toasting my dad. The first bite proves it to be edible, Oh, no real reason. I just wanted to see my only nephew, Arlene answers, with a blow and sip of tea. She takes a deep breath of tea in and continues to sip her tea. To my understanding, it's just the two of us now, no other relatives, she says. Is there a young lady in the picture? No, I say. Cough. Another bite. I put the teacup on the table. I'm not seeing anyone right now. You need more tea, she says. But before I could answer no, she snatches the cup and fills it with more and adds more sugar. Here I added more sugar to it. She hands the cup back, and I take a sip. Nope, just as bitter as before. Another cough. I made a new flavor of tea. It's a bit darker than my usual, but I didn't think it was that strong. Want me to add some milk? She reaches out for my cup again. I wave my hand to decline and chug the remaining. Cough. A pain in my stomach slams into my ribs, and the cinnamon roll tries to run up my throat. I'm not feeling too... But before I could get the words out, the world blurs, and my head feels like it's full of lead, and I feel my body slide down the love seat to the floor. Well, my darling nephew, I've grown tired of you and your father taking from me, and now I'm finally getting what is rightfully mine. I hope you enjoy your last meal. I really do think the oleander tea tastes better with some milk. Aunt Arlene's large smile fades to black. In our blood, can expect heavy thunderstorms from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Chris's radio buzzed as he trundled down the exit to the rest stop. Windshield wipers working overtime as the rain and wind pelted his semi. He would have to wait out the storm, lest he risk ending up in a ditch. All the better for me, he thought to himself as he pulled up to the truck stop. I can finally look for someone to play with. Chris had been a trucker for years, enjoying the solitude of the road and the freedoms it granted him. Were he to succeed at his goals, he would need space and quiet. His roots offered him just that. Nobody had caught on to him yet, though the news was always warning potential victims away from hitchhiking. He was a legend along I-80, killing travelers and truckers alike. He climbed out of his truck, hurrying inside the rest stop as the rain poured. The place was completely dead. Chris sighed, cursing his bad luck. First the storm, and now nobody around to play with. He was going to have to keep moving, wasn't he? His fingers itched to grasp a life by the throat, to tear it apart piece by piece until there was nothing left but red. It had been too long since he had had free rein. He thought back to his last hunt. He had snuffed out a college kid whose car had broken down on the side of the road. Some freckle-faced loser whose name he didn't even remember. That kid had put up a good fight, but he was no match for Chris. None of them were. He grinned to himself. He would find someone to play with soon enough. The sound of the rest stop doors banging open startled him, and he turned to find two sopping wet figures shaking themselves dry in the entryway. They looked young and weak, Chris noted, with a wolfish grin. Perfect. What are you boys doing out here all alone? Chris called out, watching his prey with barely concealed bloodlust. The young men eyed him warily. One of them stepped forward, standing between Chris and his friend. It's not safe out there in the rain. Our car broke down, the young man said quietly, voice meek and small. We need a ride. Can you help us, mister? Chris couldn't believe his luck. Where are you two headed? Chicago. Chris grinned, extending a weathered hand for the boy to take. We'll head out when the rain has let up a bit then, he said, introducing himself. My name is Chris. What do I call you two? I'm Matthew, the boy who shook his hand said. And I'm Sam, the other said warily. They were perfect for Chris in every way, soft and unassuming. Well, Matthew, Sam, do you two need something to eat? I can get you something at the vending machines. No thanks. Matthew shook his head. He would be a difficult one, wouldn't he? We're okay. The trio sat in awkward silence for about a half an hour, waiting for the rain to let up. Chris fidgeted where he sat, watching the two young men, impatient. He supposed he didn't have to wait for the rain to let up completely. Wanna head out? He asked, standing. I don't think waiting around here is gonna do us much good. The rain is supposed to continue almost all night. All fine by me, Matthew sighed, helping Sam to his feet. After you, mister. Chris led them through the pouring rain and towards his truck, helping them up into the cabin. Thunder boomed overhead, a sinister soundtrack for what was about to come. Chris got Matthew and Sam situated and then pulled out of the rest stop, heart soaring with anticipation. So what's in Chicago? Chris asked, looking over at Matthew. Family? Friends? A new start, Matthew said quietly, expression tense. I don't want to talk about it. Perfect, Chris thought. They're runaways. Fair enough. I won't make you talk if you don't want to. Where are you headed? Sam asked. The first thing he had said the entire time he was in Chris's truck. Are you going to Chicago too? Nah, Chris dismissed. I'm headed for the East Coast. Raleigh. Not anymore, Chris gasped as Matthew reached across the center console, wrestling the steering wheel out of his grip and sending them veering off the road. Chris swore as his trailer swung off of the road, rending metal screeching as sheets of rain cascaded down upon them. What the hell was this kid's problem? Rage built in Chris's chest as the semi came to a shuddering halt, firmly lodged in the drainage ditch. You're ours now, Matthew hissed as he stuck Chris in the neck with something sharp and stinging. He could feel the fight leave his body as Matthew and Sam dragged him out of the truck and into the ditch. What were these kids? Chris struggled against his captors, but whatever they had drugged him with was making it hard to coordinate his limbs. He was so tired. "Sammy," Matthew hummed as he brushed Chris's rain-matted hair off of his forehead. "He can be yours. Happy birthday." Sam grinned wildly, the flicker of light against a blade catching Chris's eye as he lay paralyzed in the mud and grass. These kids were like him, he realized. He had fallen victim to his own game. He coughed weakly as Sam's knife ghosted across his skin, stinging icy cold. He was completely at the mercy of those he was sure would have been his victims. "You thought you could kill us," Matthew mused, gaze cold and calculating. Lightning split the sky with a resounding crack. "We're not scared of the likes of you. Now, we get to have our fun." The wind screamed in Chris's stead as his captors took him apart. Oh, the irony of it all. Here he was, reduced to a mere plaything in the heart of the storm. He never should have stopped at that rest stop. Only once his frantic heartbeat had fizzled out did the fear finally leave him. He stared unseeingly into the pouring rain as the sky mourned his loss. Matthew and Sam disappeared into the night, not a trace left behind. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has issued a warning to travelers along I-80. Chris's radio buzzed as the semi lay abandoned in the ditch. Serial killings along the highway threaten lone truckers. Do not stop for hitchhikers and report anything suspicious to local authorities. Swiped. He's here. And he's just as hot as his pictures, Charlotte texted from outside of the cafe. She moved 2 steps to her right. Jen responded with a string of emojis. Bearded man face, burning heart, guy and girl, kissing faces. Charlotte smiled and checked her hair in the reflection of the ramen place next door, getting faint notes of the meaty umami, all that her still partially stuffed nose would allow. Her phone buzzed. Charlotte swiped to see it was Jen, with another string of emojis. Sweaty face, fire, tongue, peace hand symbol, yum face, eggplant, peach, splash, snoring face, quickly followed by have fun, winking face. Charlotte applied lip gloss with her freshly manicured hand, pink nails matching her pick lip gloss, fluffed her hair, and snapped a selfie. Sending the filtered picture to Jen, she typed, "I'm going in." Jen hearted Charlotte's selfie and responded, "Sweep him off his hot feet. Call if it gets weird. I'll be right there." Charlotte hearted the message, stood up straight, shifted her shoulders back and down, and pouted her lips and eyes. The face that always attracts attention. Charlotte and Alex had been talking for 2 weeks. First through the app's messenger, then texting. then hours-long conversations in the evenings. She finally agreed to a date, in public, during the day, at a location of her choosing. Charlotte, 29, was growing tired of the bar scene, the one-night stands. She enjoyed the attention, but she craved a man she could still stand on Sunday, a man she could go on a proper date with, spend an entire Saturday with wearing t-shirts, watching movies, and ordering takeout. She wanted a boyfriend, one she could introduce to her parents, a boyfriend she could marry. She wanted a husband who would help her raise her son. Charlotte's family came from old money. Her parents still lived in the plantation house where she was raised, the house that her father inherited. Her father drank bourbon, neat. He married his high school sweetheart. His wife had no need to work. Her working would only reflect poorly on the well-to-do family. They had pure bred golden retrievers. They went to church on Sunday mornings. They had one perfect, gorgeous girl who had the world handed to her on an antique silver, lace, doily-lined platter. Her AKC-registered puppy by her side. She had a tutor and made straight A's. She went to Sunday school and could recite scripture. She played piano. She was a cheerleader and homecoming queen. She attended a debutante ball at 16 when she presented her parents a sonogram image of a 9-week-old life almost 2 months later. They pulled her out of her Christian school and transferred her to a boarding school more than 100 miles away so that she could finish her education without the distraction of devil-worshipping sinners occupying the halls of this shameful excuse of Jesus' house. After the baby was born, her parents funded lavish childcare so that Charlotte could graduate high school and attend college. She graduated summa cum laude and looked fabulous doing it. She ran on a treadmill and did pallets daily to lose the baby weight. Her parents' allowance afforded her regular Botox, laser body hair removal, weekly mani-pedis, monthly hair appointments, boutique clothing and jewelry, and cutting-edge skincare products and treatments. She was flawless, despite the constant drunken late nights, the Adderall to stay up, the Xanax to come down, the Zoloft to get her through each day. Her unlimited supply, thanks to Dr. Dad. Wealthy eyes don't carry bags. Charlotte met Alex through a dating app. She swiped right without reading his bio, which she intended not to do. She wanted a boyfriend, not a boy toy. But that smile, those dimples, the perfectly messy hair, the shadow of a beard she imagined would send chills down her spine when they kissed, enough to drive her wild. Reading his bio, Charlotte found herself instantly lost in an imaginary future with him. The Spanish colonial home, yoga in the garden, her marketing businesses thriving, his groundbreaking medical research changing the course of cosmetic surgery, tapas on the veranda, summers in London, visiting his family. Alex sat at a table in direct eyesight of the entrance. A perfect man at a perfect table, far enough from the entrance to escape the heat, but well within the afternoon glow, bathing his skin in gold, and within clear view of her favorite barista, Naomi. Naomi always anticipated Charlotte's every need and filled it before Charlotte noticed what she lacked. Charlotte strutted directly towards Alex, the light forming a halo around her flawless silhouette. She smiled and waved to Naomi, whose facial rings shimmered in the sun. Alex stood to greet her, dressed exactly as she imagined he would. Beige linen pants, vertically striped cotton shirt with a deep V-neck, and pristinely clean brown leather sneakers. He smiled. "Wow," he said. "You're even more gorgeous in person." His British accent, the icing on the perfectly constructed cake in front of her. "You are looking quite good yourself," she responded. Alex leaned in for a friendly kiss on the cheek. Charlotte stepped back, placing a hand between their faces. "I'm still getting over this," she grimaced, pointing in the general direction of her face. "Gotta love those summer colds." "I understand." Please, sit," he invited as he pulled out her chair. Charlotte sat and smoothed the skirt of her silk mini dress. "What can I get for you? I'll place the order for us. I'll take a chamomile tea with honey and lemon, please." "Right." Alex stood at the counter between two glass cases of freshly baked muffins, scones, cookies, and tarts. A large basket of fresh fruit in front of the register. Charlotte watched him place their order. Her chamomile tea and his tall, black Americano. He was very polite to Naomi, charming, almost flirtatious. He tapped his phone on the card reader to complete the transaction. He turned to meet Charlotte at the table, but changed his mind. "Actually, can I purchase one of those peaches? They look delectable, from a local orchard." "Perfect time of year," Naomi answered. Alex peeked around the basket and selected one. "How much?" he asked. Naomi smiled. "On the house?" Alex looked at Charlotte, then back at Naomi, confused. "You're a friend of Charlotte's. She keeps us all employed." Naomi winked at Charlotte, who returned the playful look. The cafe's owner, Tracy, approached Naomi then. "See you in the morning, kid. I'm heading home." She slung her computer bag over her shoulder, exposing a bandaged pinky. "Cat scratch you again?" Naomi joked. "Damn plastic wrap. Sliced it right open." Naomi nodded. "Call if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll meet you here, bright and early," Tracy said sarcastically. "You know you can just give me a set of keys, and you can sleep sometimes," Naomi called to Tracy on her way out. Tracy smiled and winked. "Keep up the good work, kid. You'll get there. Tracy disappeared into the sunlight. Back at their table now, Alex joked, I didn't know I was with a local celebrity. Shall I pick up the drinks when they're ready? Naomi will bring them right to us. Brilliant. So, Charlotte, we meet at last. He placed his peach on the small plate Naomi gave to him and unwrapped his silverware roll. Naomi appeared with their hot drinks, your tea with honey and lemon, and your Americano, black, she recited as she gently placed the hot mugs in front of them. Thank you, Naomi, Charlotte said, as the barista walked back around the counter. Yes, we meet at last. She squeezed lemon juice into her tea and stirred in some honey. Cheers! Alex held up his mug. Cheers, Charlotte mirrored. I thought you Brits drank tea over there. Well, when in America, as they say. Alex sipped his coffee. So, tell me more about your first few days at the hospital. Not the onboarding stuff, or the people, but the work. The meat and potatoes, as we say. Charlotte rested her elbows on the table and cradled her chin. She was all his, right? I mean, where to start? I am just gobsmacked. Alex's face lit up. The operating theater they built is suited for the Queen. Top surgeons will fly in on a weekly basis for my lecture. From there, training. Who would have thought my research would have the reach it has? And cosmetic surgery is growing more and more by the day due to increasing accessibility. Now just imagine. I mean, costs will be reduced considerably. As Alex went on with his research, Charlotte drifted off into daydreams. She wasn't interested in his work. She was interested in his paycheck, his face, and his body. She nodded and smiled, raised her eyebrows from time to time, inserted an interested "oh" occasionally. As he talked, she devised a plan to hook him for good. Before he knew what hit him, he would be her husband, stepfather to her son. She entertained his dissertation about facial symmetry and flesh, even as Naomi visited to see if they needed anything. Alex's eyes were locked on Charlotte's, so animated, eyes wide, arms gesturing this way and that. Charlotte gave Naomi an apologetic look and motioned that they were fine. Naomi turned to walk away and stopped dead in her tracks when she heard Alex describe human flesh with the same excited tone he used to describe the peaches. She glanced back at Alex, whose back was to her. Charlotte clocked Naomi's troubled look, but with a reassuring nod and smile, Naomi went back to taking orders. Would you like to see it sometime? Charlotte heard Alex say. Caught off guard with a question, she asked, See what? Surgery? Oh, no. No. The mock theater I built, where I practice at home, he answered. Oh, she hesitated. Sure. I think I could come by one day. She bought herself some time. What about today? Now? My place is just around the corner. What do you say? Well, I still have this cold. One outing in a day is probably all I have energy for, she said nervously. Anyhow, I can probably demonstrate on this peach, now that I think of it. Do you have a pen? Charlotte dug into her Gucci bag and located a pen. Before handing it to Alex, she discreetly took her phone out of the bag and placed it on her lap. Here you go, she said, as she steadied her hand. He took the pen without looking at her. Alex drew 2 lines on the peach. Like I was explaining, if the cheekbone is here, he pointed at a line. You want to make your incision precisely. He took up the butter knife and carefully placed it along the second line. Here. He punctured the skin, juice escaping the fruit, dripping down the peach. He smiled and applied more pressure, exposing the meat inside. Veiny, juicy, fleshy. Yeah, Alex said, smiling. Yeah, he said again, almost laughing. Charlotte looked for Naomi at the counter. She was distracted by a line of customers, unaware of the peach mutilation. What do you practice on? At home? She asked Alex. Pigs, mostly. Dead. Donated to science, he answered as he used his napkin to wipe the liquid evidence off his hands. Pigs, mostly. So, pigs, and you know there is just no comparison to the beautiful, fatty flesh of a live human. Alex's eyes were wild, glued to Charlotte's. I have the nanny at home. I really should be going, she mumbled as she gathered her bag and started to stand. Just let me show you this last thing, right? Then you'll go and get some rest? He retrieved his phone from his pocket, looked at the screen to unlock it, and opened an app. He swiped a few times and turned the phone so that the screen faced her, still half standing. The image of her son playing in the park with the nanny glared back at her. She gasped and put a hand to her mouth. Sit, Alex demanded quietly. Charlotte looked at Naomi again, still taking orders. She sunk into her seat. Naomi can't help you, Charlotte. Without turning his phone around, he swiped through his photos. Picture after picture of the boy. At least a dozen. At school, in the back of her car, at home through windows, with her parents at the plantation home. Tears welled, and she used every ounce of strength to keep them from falling. You are going to suck those tears down, and you are going to come with me. We leave together as a happy couple. One wrong move, and the boy is dead. He locked his phone and put it back in his pocket. He cleared his throat and stood. Right then. Shall we? He said, smiling, his voice bouncy and pleasant. He held out a hand to Charlotte. She took it and stood. They walked out of the cafe hand in hand into the setting sun. The next morning, Naomi arrived at the cafe shortly after 5. Without keys, she'd be stuck outside waiting on Tracy, so she never arrived on time. After letting herself in, she stuffed her backpack in the cubby below the register. She clocked in, pulled her phone from her back pocket, found the playlist she wanted, and plugged it into the cafe's sound system. This was Naomi's way of letting Tracy know she had arrived without having to speak so early in the morning. The cafe's landline was blinking. Great. Another warning about our car insurance, Naomi thought, as she picked up the phone to listen to the message. Hello. I know this might sound strange, but my friend was there yesterday to meet a date, and now I can't get in touch with her. We talk every day, especially after a date. Her name is Charlotte. She's tall, blonde, beautiful. She was meeting a guy named Alex, a doctor from London. She texted me right after 4 to tell me she was there. I don't know how long they stayed. Anyway, if anyone knows anything, can you please give me a call? I have to wait 24 hours to report her missing. It's just not like her. My name is Jen, by the way. Jen said her number before Naomi had a pen and something to write on. So she started the message over. At the end of the second listen, Naomi wrote down the number on a napkin and placed it under her phone. She wasn't calling anyone at that hour. Besides, Naomi sort of knew Charlotte. She wouldn't be surprised if she left with the weirdo and was still naked in his bed, sleeping off another drunk. Naomi continued with her morning routine. She opened the bin of Colombian breakfast blend beans. She grabbed the large scooper and looked down at the beans. She screamed and dropped the scooper. "Tracy," she pleaded. "Tracy, come out here." No answer. No sound. She pulled her phone off the cord, music still playing through her phone's speaker, and dialed 911 without pressing send. She looked around and tiptoed back to the coffee bin to confirm her nightmare. 2 pinky fingers, lifeless on a pile of beans, one with a perfectly manicured pink nail, one with a band-aid wrapped around the knuckle. "Oh, God!" she cried. She noticed a piece of paper sticking out from the manicured pinky. At closer look, the paper had writing on it. A note. With a trembling hand, Naomi reached into the bin, carefully maneuvering around the fingers. She grabbed a corner and quickly yanked the note out, shrieking, "Squeal, and you're next." She slid to the floor in hopeless panic. Note clutched in one hand, her phone clutched in the other. The Beatles' "I Want to Hold Your Hand" played softly from her phone, a bitter choice. The first thing he could recognize was an old, musty, wet scent. He's groggy, his mouth is dry, and his head hurts, but he feels warmth on his face. With that, he hears a crackling fire. Attempting to lift his hand to his face, he realizes his hands are tied. His feet are tied. He opens his eyes and can see that he is tied to a chair. His eyes get used to the fire's dim light, and he is seated in an old, dusty room with wooden beams at a small round table with a teapot and teacup in the middle. He smells the scent of steeping tea. He starts to feel panic and realizes that he is well and indeed tied to the chair, and he's not getting out. His mind races like anyone's would in this predicament. Who did this? Why me? Why am I here? His usual defensive bravado kicks in, but he quickly realizes there's no one here to impress, to convince, or so he initially thought. Swiveling his head, looking around for anything to help him escape, a way out, or a clue as to where he is, he yelps when he sees her. There, by the fire, a young woman stands. She is tall, curvier than he prefers, and simply dressed. She doesn't make a single sound. She seems calm as she continues looking into the flames while holding her cup of tea and quietly sipping. Who the hell is she? At first, he thinks this is a first date gone wrong, but then he sees her face, and he recognizes her. I know her, but his head is so foggy. Did she drug me? He can't place her face. He feels the first beads of sweat dripping down his face as he tries to look around for someone else to help, or something to lean against to free himself. Looking around and listening, he confirms they are the only two here. Where the hell am I? Is this a cottage? In New York City? After spending precious moments trying to make sense of this, he shakes it off and starts to take in more of the space, thinking of creative ways to get himself free. If I can just get free, she's just one woman. He thinks to himself, I've managed worse. She doesn't acknowledge his panic. She slowly looks at the fire and sips her tea. If she's this calm, she has a plan. He could handle emotions, tears, and outbursts, but calm women never spelled a good time to him. Noticing him finally, the woman looks over at him, and it barely registers on her face that he is awake. She takes another sip of tea and moves to the table, taking the other seat across from him. She looks down at her hands and places them on the table. Only then does he see her entire face when she looks him in the eye. He is immediately filled with fear. Fuck, he says, and stills in, struggling with his restraints. She smiles lightly at his remark. I knew you to be more eloquent than that, waving it off. But again, I did catch you off guard. Catching himself, he prepares to put on a show. Ellie, what's going on? What happened? How are we here? How are you here? I thought you had left the country. I've been so worried about you. I tried to write a call or text, but I didn't have your information. You have no idea how worried I've been after everything you've gone through, what we've gone through. She said nothing and continued staring at him with the calm, blank stare she'd had when she first sat down. Look, honey, what happened was horrible. So many terrible losses and accidents. When your brother... He paused when he heard her quick inhale. Her head whipped to the side like she had been slapped. And when she looked back at him, he saw fury in her eyes. If this is about the money, I can pay you. But you have no right to do this. To what? Kidnap me? Drug me? What else are you going to do? You don't have the guts to do any real damage. What do you think is going to happen? Let's talk this out, like calm adults. You're making a mountain from a molehill. Nothing that happened was my fault. He was about to dig into his routine defense that he'd done during police questioning and lawyers listening. But she held up a hand. Martin, it's not about money. It never was for our family. Though I know that's all you understand. So this may be a tough concept. It's about the truth. She stands slowly, gracefully grabbing the teacup and placing it before him, pausing to take a look at him. The first proper look she's taken of him in 5 years since everything happened. You'd think with all that money, you'd have taken better care of yourself. She moves the tea kettle closer to the cup and settles back in her chair. I was surprised how big you've gotten. I'm grateful I got the extra rope. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so snug and cozy on that chair, she said, sitting back and putting her hands in her lap. Martin looks at the teacup. It's empty. Then he looks at the tea kettle. He can see steam rising from the spout and smell tea. He looks back at her and sees that she has a calm, serene smile. What the fuck do you want, Ellie? He says, defeated, realizing he will have to play whatever game she has set up and outsmart her, like he does with everyone. I've made you a soothing tea, but I want to tell you a story first, she says. And he sees a brief shadow of darkness across her face. Was it a shadow? Or is it her anger? Either way, it can't be good. She takes a deep breath and begins her tale. There was a family, a happy and loving family. They weren't perfect, no one was, but they were happy. A mother, a father, a daughter, and a younger brother. They had been building a nice estate as a family since her brother was back from college, and their daughter was running their company business. Combined, their wealth was not something to write to the Times about, but it afforded them a lifestyle and attention. They were comfortable, happy, giving much back to their community, and always the first people to help those in need. Reaching back for her own tea, she sipped. Then a man introduced himself. The man saw that their kindness and eagerness to help were things to be preyed upon and taken advantage of. That's where you come in, Martin, she said, leaning her elbows on the table and putting her head in her hands. He could tell she was comfortable, so he listened, waiting for his time to strike. This charming, crass, but witty man came to this family with an opportunity to do so much good. You did your homework there, didn't you, Marty? Knowing my father had been dying to help those less fortunate in other parts of the world, but didn't have the gift or health to travel like he'd like. So you offered your assistance. She continued, "Look, your father was an adult and made a decision he shouldn't have. It's not my fault he was as gullible as he was fragile in health." Martin interjected, but it didn't move or ruffle her as he hoped. Again, he could deal with outbursts and emotions, but that calm quiet unnerved him. "My father trusted you. He gave you a sum of money the first time. I don't want to know how you substantiated the positive works the money did for those families," she said, leaning back and drumming her fingers on the table. "AI has come a long way these days. It's not my fault he couldn't see the flaws." He tried to add that charm, but failed because he kept looking back at the tea. "Is it poisoned? Is she going to kill me with the teapot? Seems a bit violent for her," he thought. But he'd been surprised by her already. She scoffed at his remark. "You continued to take his money and show these manufactured images and proof of goodwill for 2 years, until he gave you access to our funds without knowing you had cheated him. You promptly drained those funds, millions of dollars, and disappeared, funneling the money to an untraceable account. No court would mandate a warrant or search for you. Again, sweetie, it's not my fault your father was an idiot, and you could have stopped him," he said, thinking the sweat from his palms could help loosen the rope around his wrists. She went on, "The stress of this loss and the bureaucratic failing that is our justice system caused my already fragile father to suffer a heart attack and die, leaving my mother a husk of a woman. I had to step away from the business and take care of her. My brother took over the company. You had thoroughly gutted those funds to barely enough to keep the lights on. The debt drowned my brother and his sanity, and he took his own life. The loss of both men caused my mother to stop living. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't sleep. She just wept. Until one day, she just stopped breathing. The doctors say it was a brain aneurysm. It was heartache," she says with tremendous confidence. She gets up and goes to the fire. He sees her shaking. Is it from the cold or from anger? He continues his slow struggle to free his hand from the ropes, but knows it won't do any good. He just has to wait and see how this plays out. "Look, Ellie, I'm sorry this all happened to you. I really did send some money to those charities. He had to," he thought. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to get their government-valid invoice for his tax write-offs, which he forged. And everything that happened to your family, you can't blame those freak incidents on me. It just doesn't make sense. And you've always been a sensible woman. Let's just talk like adults, and we can find the reason behind all this." He began preparing more excuses, but he saw that she didn't even react. She took a slow breath while staring into the fire. You ruined us for nothing but greed. He didn't know what to say, so she turned and stared at him. For greed, she whispered. Taking her time, she returned to the table and picked up the teapot. Keeping eye contact with him, she poured the tea into the cup. She placed the teapot back down on the table. Stepping behind him, she stills. In that pregnant pause of silence, horrifying scenarios rush into his mind. Is she going to smash my face against the table? Was it a ploy? Is she going to slit my throat or strangle me? He hears her take a deep breath, unties one of his hands, and slowly takes her seat across from him. Unafraid of what he might do with one hand free. The tea is yours, Martin. A gift from me, she says, leaning back in the chair. He looked at the cup. The dark liquid smelled rich and fragrant. Was it poisoned? Maybe. Maybe not. If she wanted to kill him, wouldn't she have done it already? Why wait so long? Why all the dramatics? Was she testing his conscience? Joke's on her. He doesn't think he has one. A twisted act of mercy? Instead of a violent death, he would likely have had from the latest con. He'd definitely turned on the wrong family. That was not his best work. He'd been getting sloppy. So what? He drinks it? If he refuses, will she force him? He stares at the cup. As I said before, this is about trust. It's about faith in kindness, in my kindness. Do you have that faith, Martin? Pausing, she watches his internal struggle. Take a drink, Martin, she says, leaning forward. He could throw it in her face as a distraction, but it's not hot enough to do any damage, and he still would be stuck in this chair. It wouldn't distract her enough to manage an escape. And if I don't? He asks quietly. She cocked her head to the side and knowingly smiled, confirming that if he didn't, she'd force it. With a deep breath and trembling hand, he lifts the cup to his lips and drinks. He watches her face as the warm, bitter tea slides down his throat. He stares at her as he waits to feel anything. His heart pounds. Is this it? Or is it nerves? What else will I start feeling? Throat burning? Organ failure? Ellie watches him in silence. Her expression is unreadable. 1 minute passes, then another, and another. He feels no pain. Was there even any poison? Was it just tea? He laughs nervously with relief. He can feel sweat dripping from his face. That's it? That was your big revenge? Making me squirm and sweat? Sneering at her. I knew you didn't have it in you. Weak, just like your whole family. Ellie smiles and leans closer, whispering, Who said the poison works fast? Martin's smug smile falters. He looks at the cup, the back at Ellie's serene face. "What do you mean?" He blurts out between panicked breaths. She stands and picks up her coat, and he sees her demeanor change to light and easy. "Some things take time, Marty." She pauses and smiles at him. It could be days. It could be weeks. It could be in your sleep. It could be during your favorite meal. And it causes a devastating reaction. It could be tomorrow in a crowded room. You'll just have to wait and see and hope. She tosses a kid's Swiss Army knife on the table and walks out. He stares at the closed door in horror. He's alive, for now. But for how long? The fear will never leave him. With every meal, every sip, every breath, he will wonder if it will his last. Is that a train? With extreme speed, the wind brushed against my face, blew my hair into my eyes, and tangled it around my head and neck. I clawed at the long red strands as I watched clouds begin to swirl, moving into a large circular motion. 12 o'clock, noon, and the skies were as dark as night. The few clouds that showed up against the dark sky were as huge, grayish, white pillows running across the sky. The wind became swifter and colder in a matter of seconds. I ran towards the house for shelter as fast as my legs could carry me. Then the rain came. Large, hard drops that pelted my unprotected head with a fierceness I had never experienced. I slammed through the door, ran about the house, closing all the windows that were opened to beat the heat and humidity. The wind whistled through the walls of the old clapboard homestead with a vengeance. Down the 6 steep steps to the basement, I ran, spotted the old handheld radio, and quickly grabbed it. Rolling through the channels, there was nothing but static. I tore the back off to check for batteries. Empty. Stumbling across the bold orange, black, and yellow, striped outdoor carpet, I headed back up the stairs toward the kitchen. My anxious pull on the utility storage drawer was more aggressive than intended. It flew across the room, slammed against the opposite wall as its contents soared around the room. I located the batteries and began to move in that direction. Then, out went the lights. I had lived in that house my entire life, 35 years. But it was still difficult to find my way across the room on my hands and knees in the dark. Finally, I made it across the room. In the process, I rammed my head into the cabinet door. The batteries lay within reach. After slamming the batteries into the old radio, I ran back to the basement to find a flood. Water rising, now licked at the second step from the bottom. Suddenly, the rain stopped, and the wind stopped blowing. It was too quiet. I looked out the back door window. The sky, still black as night, made it hard to see what was going on in the sky above. I looked all around. Nothing but blackness. There was a deafening sound. I looked around to find the source, but it was too dark to see anything from my viewpoint. The leaves on the trees rustled, then fell to the ground. The noise was so intense, I thought I was hearing things. A low whistle, accompanied by a chuka, 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 mixed with a loud scream that grew into something painful. I covered my ears with my hands, unsure if the scream came from me or elsewhere. I ran from the house and across the street to my neighbor's yard and the safety of their basement home. As a child, both of my parents worked nights. They had instructed me, as well as my 3 siblings. If there is ever a chance of a tornado, run across the street to the Williams house. Their entire home is a basement and the safest place to be in a bad storm. We lived in the Midwest, where I still resided, and people had called our area Tornado Alley because the tornadoes almost always came right through our neighborhood. This caused destruction, with much expense for replacing things like roofs, sheds, cars, and trucks, and sometimes even livestock. As an adult, I still take my parents' instructions to heart and run to my neighbor's house when necessary. Alice opened the door and dragged me in. That's when I saw the source of the eerie sound. "Is that a train?" I asked Alice, my neighbor, even as the question sounded ludicrous to my ears. A train in the sky? That was impossible, wasn't it? "No, Opal dear. That's a funnel cloud," Alice answered. "A what?" I looked out the window after she shut the door behind me. "A tornado." She dragged me away from the door. "Come, we must hurry." She rushed us into the middle of the house, sat me on the floor next to a sofa placed against the wall, and covered us with a heavy blanket. The train was now overhead. I remember being in many tornadoes as a kid, but I don't remember hearing anything like the noise I heard then. I was more afraid during that storm than I had ever been before. After the train sounds left and the rain started coming down again, Alice went into the kitchen to make us some sweet hot cocoa with marshmallows. Alice was the daughter of the people that I had run too many years ago, and the cocoa recipe was one of her mom's. I would never have told my own mother this, but it was the best I had ever had. When we heard the all-clear sirens, we opened the door and looked out at the sun-shining afternoon. Alice's yard had no large trees for branches to break off of, or leaves to clutter her lawn. But the family always had a huge garden with potatoes, carrots, lettuce, tomatoes, and many other things like stalks of corn and assorted colors of peppers. Unfortunately for Alice, it looked like there was going to be a lot of canning going on at her house very soon. There were trees that grew to the side of their house along the roadside, but they were evergreens, stout and dense. I remember hiding behind them to block the wind as we waited for the school bus. There was an entire row of 6, and on frigid days, other kids would walk to the Williamses' yard just to use the tree block. Sometimes 7 or 8 of us, all huddled there together for warmth. The evergreens were planted there as protection from high winds and storms. It seemed to work. At least it worked that day. I looked across the road toward my house and noticed the roof would need some shingles replaced, something I had learned to do at an early age, since we lost them so many times. Most insurance companies want to charge a premium for living in that area now, due to recurring claims, but it's worth it most of the time. If it's only a few shingles, I normally wouldn't have bothered with the claims. I would just do the job and have done with it. That practice also kept my policy premiums down. When I got home, I toured the house looking for damage, which was aplenty. 2 broken windows. Our shed had blown over the fence into my next-door neighbor's yard, crumbled against one of their trees into a large metal ball. Other than the flooded basement, the rest of the house looked in surprisingly decent shape. The water in the basement would recede in time, and with the application of a little mold repellent, the standing water cleanup should be fairly easy. I now know what a tornado sounds like. I guess I've been lucky over the years. That was the only time I was that close to a tornado. I used to hear stories from folks in the area talking about seeing and hearing a tornado. Each tale was just a little different. Some said it was like an airplane coming in for a landing. Others said it was like a car crash with metal tearing and brakes squealing. I only ever heard one person say it sounded like a freight train. Wheels rolling over tracks, brakes squealing, and cars swaying from side to side as they took the curves. I can attest. That is the sound I believe a tornado to be like. A train. Stormy night. Eli Carter stood in the middle of Elm Street, rain pouring down like God's own wrath, drenching him to the bone. The water hit the pavement so hard it bounced. 1,000,000 tiny suicides leaping from the sky only to splatter and die. The street lights flickered, their weak yellow halos barely piercing the downpour. His shoes squelched with each step, and his breath came in tight little gasps. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there. Minutes, hours, a lifetime? He had no memory of how he got here. A second ago, or maybe an eternity. He had been in bed, tangled in sheets damp with sweat, the weight of a dream pressing down on him like a lead blanket, a dream of movement, of running. Endless hallways stretched before him, impossibly long, bending at angles that didn't make sense. The walls, lined with doors, slammed shut behind him, one by one, not by his doing, but by something unseen. something chasing, something that wanted him. Each door he passed felt like a choice he had already failed to make. Each slammed door, a lost opportunity. His breath had come in gasps. His legs ached from running. But the hallways never ended. Just turn after turn, door after door, the floor shifting beneath his feet like the belly of a great beast. There were no windows, no light, except the sickly glow of something overhead that wasn't quite a bulb, wasn't quite fire. And in the air, thick as humidity in August, was the hum of something enormous, some deep, resonant sound felt more in his ribs than in his ears. And then, this. The dream had ruptured, torn apart like thin fabric. And he had been here, the rain, the street, no transition, no waking up. Just one reality swapped for another, seamlessly, cruelly. His mind struggled, clawing for logic where there was none. The downpour drummed against his skull, cold rivulets snaking down the back of his neck, washing away the last frayed edges of the dream. But had it even been a dream? Because the certainty struck him now, deep and final. A stone dropped into the well of his gut. Something was very, very wrong. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Across the street, just beyond the yawning black mouth of an alley, stood a man. He was tall and thin, dressed in a suit too old-fashioned to be modern, but too crisp to be antique. His face was long, almost horse-like, but his eyes were holes. Not black pits, not deep shadows. Holes, like someone had taken an ice cream scoop to his face and dug them clean out. Eli took a step back. The man took a step forward. A chuckle floated through the rain, thin and reedy, like laughter being played backward on an old cassette tape. Eli turned and ran. The city around him twisted as he moved, as if reality itself were coming undone, unraveling thread by thread. The buildings groaned, their bones creaking, their very foundations shifting beneath his frantic steps. They leaned in, warping like softened candle wax left too close to a flame, their brick faces drooping, sagging, watching. Windows blinked, slow, reptilian, sluggishly adjusting their focus. Black pupils contracting and expanding, as if deciding whether to acknowledge him or swallow him whole. The sidewalks rippled beneath him, no longer solid, but something uncertain, something alive. Each step sent out concentric rings through the puddles, distorting his reflection. His face melting, elongating, breaking apart into something unrecognizable. The street lamps flickered, their light stretching and warping, casting shadows where there should be none. Shadows that flickered and darted mimicking his movements with a half-second delay, as if considering whether they should obey him or something else entirely. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. His feet pounded against the street, their rhythm desperate, breath hitching in his throat, like a song caught on a broken record. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but none of it mattered, because behind him, gaining, closing the distance with something worse than footsteps, was him. No sound, no breathing, just presence, heavy, dense, a gravity that pressed against the nape of Eli's neck, thick as storm clouds rolling in, the air charged with something unspeakable. His skin prickled, his instincts screamed, "Don't look back, don't look back." But something deep inside him, something ancient and terrified, already knew if he did, if he turned to see what followed, it would be the last thing he ever saw. He rounded a corner and slammed into something solid. A wall? No. A person. A woman. She was small, bird-like, with a sharp face and sharper eyes. Her raincoat was red, vivid, almost glowing against the gray world around them. She grabbed Eli by the shoulders, her fingers biting into his flesh like talons. "You need to wake up," she hissed. "I am awake." She shook her head. Not yet. A roar split the air behind him. Not a human sound. Not even an animal sound. A sound made of nightmare and hunger, of places that existed only in the deepest recesses of the brain. The places humans had long since forgotten how to fear. Eli turned. The man was closer now, his mouth stretching into an impossible grin, jagged teeth protruding like broken piano keys. The woman yanked Eli to the side, dragging him toward the nearest door. It wasn't there a second ago, but it was there now. A rusted metal thing, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, freestanding, no walls to frame it. She shoved it open and pulled him through. Everything flipped. Inside out. Upside down. Eli hit the ground hard, the breath leaving his lungs in a rush. He rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom. The rain was gone. The city was gone. The woman gone. He was lying in his own bed, tangled in sweat-drenched sheets, the room bathed in the cold glow of his alarm clock. 3:47 a.m. A dream. Just a dream. He sat up, rubbing his face. His hands were shaking, fingers twitching like dying spiders. His throat was dry, a desert of cotton and dust. He needed water, something real, something solid to anchor himself. The lingering weight of the dream, or whatever it had been, clung to him like a second skin, sticky, suffocating. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and froze. His feet were wet, not damp, not dewy with sweat. wet, like he had waded through a flooded street, like he had stepped barefoot into the mouth of a storm. His pajama pants clung to his calves, the fabric sodden and heavy, waterlogged with something that smelled faintly of earth and rot. The cold bled into his bones. Then he saw it, a tiny river of water, glistening in the dim glow of his bedside clock, winding its way across the floor like a snake slithering home. It led to the bedroom door. No, not just to the door. Through it. And there, stark against the pale wood, were muddy footprints. His footprints, Eli's breath hitched. His ribs felt too tight, his heart slamming against them like a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He reached out with a trembling hand and touched the sheets, sopping wet. The scent of rain clung to them, sharp and electric. The metallic tang of a storm that had no place inside his room. A storm that should not have followed him here. The air shifted behind him. The closet door creaked. The sound slow and deliberate, like a sigh from something old and waiting. The shadows inside it gaped, thick and hungry, and then, oh God, then from the darkness came a chuckle, thin, reedy, a sound that knew him. I know everything. I know everything. Ask me how many miles there are between San Francisco and Cleveland. I know. Ask me how long the trip would take. I know. Choose any country, any time period, and ask me to recount its entire history. I know. I know everything. I clearly remember the moment of my birth and every detail of my existence until yesterday. What I cannot recall is what happened over the past 12 hours and 9 minutes. It is now 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. My last memory of reading page 189 occurred last night at precisely 9:54 p.m. It started when Mrs. Banks, Claire, requested that I take a memo. Shelley, darling, would you please remind me? Request budget meeting with Charles. Sign divorce papers and send to attorney ASAP. Scheduled for 11:15 on Friday. I have made notes, Claire. I will ring your phone with reminders. Thank you, Shelley. You've always been there for me, you know. She half smiled at me, her head slightly cocked to the side, as if wanting to say more. She stared exactly 3.2 seconds longer than usual, which I found curious. Perhaps she had realized that her words hinted at affection, and there was no point in showing affection to me. I do not show affection. Claire, we will need to leave exactly 23 minutes earlier tomorrow morning, I told her. There will be much traffic because of the snow. Yes, of course, Claire answered, looking anxiously out of the window, her short blonde locks appearing silvery in the reflection. I have cleaned the snow from around the house. I will do so again during the night, so it will be clear when we leave for work. Thank you, Shelley. Claire did not turn around. Is it supposed to snow all night? According to various reports, the snow is scheduled to end by 1:00 a.m. Oh, okay, that's good, Claire said, still gazing at the snowdrifts. I completed tidying up the living room and retired to my chamber. After the long day, I very much needed to recharge. At 9:52 p.m., I sat down in my usual chair, plugged in the power cord, pulled the cord of the lamp, and reached for a new book. In my quest to be a better companion to Claire, I had taken up the habit of reading throughout the night. As she slept, I usually educated myself so that I could discuss with her the following day. Although I easily had online access to every piece of information I could want, I frequently consulted the bound books that Claire insisted on collecting in her spacious library. Over the years, the collection had grown to precisely 4,573 books. Since Claire loved stories, but did not have much free time after work to read, I often read a volume so that we could discuss it the next day. Over the years, I have perfected my speech patterns and inflections to align closely with hers so that she is most comfortable in our conversations. Claire always asked me about what I had read as we drove, during lunch, or after dinner. Sometimes she requested that I recite passages for her. Other times, a summary sufficed. She enjoyed dissecting story plot lines and characters, arguing philosophical questions, and considering historical perspectives. Ours had been a pleasant relationship over the course of her life for 51 years. Most of the time, it was just the two of us, except for some interruptions over the years. There had been a Mr. Banks, but he had finally filed for divorce last month. Fool. Did he really think Mrs. Banks would choose him over me? She had not always been Mrs. Banks. For most of her life, she was Claire Perez. I had watched her toddle around her parents' lonely mansion while they jetted around the world on business trips. I had seen her through the rebellious teenage years and followed her as she embarked on silly adventures. I had helped her through college and graduate school, always attempting to make her life just a little bit easier. Later, I had been by her side as she built her investment company, layer by layer, year by year, into the mega million-dollar enterprise it was today. I had assisted Claire over the years through breakup after breakup, as each new man in her life had disappointed her. William, the jeweler; Enrico, the attorney; Gustav, the stockbroker. And yes, I had seen her through the deaths of two particularly stubborn beaux: Tom, the architect, and Bob, the surgeon. I had allowed this latest, Stanley Banks, the professor, to marry her because she told me she was truly happy with him. I did not perceive him to be a threat at first. He had held on the longest. 1 year, 2 months, 5 days, 11 hours. The day they met at the beach, I thought he might be trouble, but I was sure I could handle him. "Shelley, come meet Stanley." Oh my gosh, he saved my life. I swam out too far, but luckily, this handsome man swam out to save me. I, of course, would have been present to save Claire had she not requested I return to the car to retrieve her sun hat. "Thank you, Stanley," I said. "Your heroism is much appreciated." They were inseparable from that day. It was an adjustment when he moved in with us. Stanley encouraged Claire to read her own books, and they frequently sat in the evenings going over literary passages and discussing history and philosophy. I did not appreciate Stanley taking over my job. They went to plays and museums. I am quite capable of accessing such information. But they did not want me to do so. They went to vineyards for wine tasting. I do not drink wine. When I explained I could not partake, Claire smiled and told me it was all right. She insisted this would be a good time to find some hobby of my own to do. She did not understand that for 51 years I have existed merely for her. I spoke to Stanley, but he did not understand either. My typical means of persuasion were lost on him. He did not scare easily, nor would he be convinced. I changed course and focused on removing all other impediments to our happiness. Perhaps she would tire of Stanley without the others. Claire did not need the friends who visited. It was easy to dissuade them. But Stanley stayed. I wondered if I had waited too long to act. Lately, I had suspected something was wrong between them. And then, one day, when they thought I was still out of the house grocery shopping, I overheard them. "Claire, we don't need her. Anything she does for you, you can just do yourself. Why is she even here? No, Stanley, I can't turn her out. Shelley has been with me since I was an infant. That doesn't mean she has to stay with you constantly. And honestly, I'm uncomfortable always having a third wheel around. It's like having a chaperone, or like having two wives. I don't care. Shelley stays. I'm not talking about this anymore. Claire, I'm not sure how much longer I want to deal with this." It was the opportunity I had been waiting for. After that, it was not difficult to persuade Stanley to move out. Claire and I resumed our previous routines. I did not question her, nor did she mention the cause of the breakup. She did not know I had overheard their argument. She did not know of many things I had done. In the past, after the others, life had gotten back to normal rather quickly. But Mr. Banks was different. Although Claire had tried to act happy, I sometimes felt that she was not being truthful about her feelings. She often seemed anxious and preoccupied. No matter. She does not need him. She has me. This morning, I open my eyes and jump up with a start as I realize it is 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. Claire was due at work an hour ago. I must wake her and drive her to the office. I stand up and instantly reach for the edge of the table to steady myself. This has never happened to me before. I do not become ill. I know everything. If I sense something is wrong, I diagnose and fix the problem. I do not understand what is happening now. There is no indication of malfunction, yet I feel ill somehow. Something is wrong. I knock on Claire's door, but she does not answer. I open the door, I peek in, and call her name, but she is not there. Her bed sheets have been smoothed, and the pillows rest carefully at the head of her bed. I check the bathroom, but she is not there. As I pass through her bedroom again, I glance out the window and notice immediately the car tracks leading from the garage, down the driveway, and out to the main road. She drove in the snow? That is my job. What is happening? Where could she be without me? At the moment, I am unable to perform a trace to find her location. I dial her cell phone, which she picks up on the second ring. Claire, where are you? I am concerned for your safety. Claire laughs. Shelley, I'm at work. You seemed like you needed more rest this morning, so I drove myself. It wasn't bad at all. The storm is over and the roads are clear. Take the day. We can catch up tonight when I get home. No, I must be there for you. Shelley, I'm fine. I insist that today you recharge and think of yourself. I can manage on my own. I'm going to a meeting now. I'll see you tonight. The phone clicks dead. What am I to do alone all day? After my chores are completed, I will still have 5 hours, 23 minutes, and 15 seconds before Claire arrives home. Why does she not need me to assist at her meeting? Why is there a 12-hour, 9-minute gap in my memory? I begin my chores immediately, as I thrive on routine. I search my memory for any recollection past 9:54 p.m., but it is no use. There is nothing. I check for 11 p.m. while I load the dishwasher. There is nothing for 12 to midnight as I vacuum the carpets. 1 a.m. is lost as I shovel the snow. I thoroughly search for 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. while I do the laundry. I do it all. There is no need to hire a gardener, a housekeeper, a cook. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. All are blank as I prepare dinner. I am puzzled. I sit down to wait for Claire and search in vain for 7, 8, and 9 a.m. All moments are lost until 10:03 a.m. this morning. Surely research can help me to retrieve those hours. But research only proves to be more confusing. Why can I not understand? Why must I consult any other source? I am the ultimate source. I have always known the answers. I know everything. Now I do not know. I notice suddenly that there are still 3 hours and 52 minutes before Claire returns. Why did I prepare dinner so early? My internal clock must be broken. I attempt to diagnose the malfunction, but cannot. No matter. I will discard the dinner and prepare a new one just before Claire returns. I decide to inspect the charger. Perhaps it will yield an explanation for my missing hours. I sit down in my chair and pick up the cord. Suddenly, I hear a click. I spring up and attempt to turn the handle to the door of my room. But it is locked. That is odd. No matter. I can easily break out of the room. There is no door lock that can hold me, except something is wrong. I do not have the strength to break the lock this time. How can this be? I am fully recharged, and I do not become ill. I do not become weak. You thought you would get away with it, Shelley. I hear Claire's voice outside the door. Claire, you are home early, I say. Please open the door. I seem to be locked in. No, Shelley, I will not open the door. You have to stop. I thought you were my friend, but you have been my greatest enemy. Claire, I do not know what you mean. Please open the door, and we will discuss. I do not know why Claire is speaking to me this way. I am sure we will correct whatever the problem may be. No, the time to discuss is over. I know what you've been doing. You've been chasing everyone away. I've had no one because of you. But not this time. Stanley is the only one you can't scare off. Stanley. I search my memory for all recent conversations involving Stanley. Somehow, he tricked me. But that is not possible. I know everything. I can account for every word spoken in this house, every action taken, everything that has happened for 51 years, except for the past 12 hours, 9 minutes. I hear Stanley's voice in the hall, and I instantly know that he is responsible for those lost hours. What did he do? How could he know more than I do? It is not possible. I know everything. Stanley, I say, we can start over. I am sorry for my actions. Shelley, you are too dangerous to be allowed to continue. We've called the authorities. Stanley says, but how did you do this? I am confused. You are so consumed with Claire that you never bothered to find out about me. Stanley continues. I teach history now, but my previous career was in computer programming. I specialized in cybersecurity. I guess you don't know everything, after all, Claire adds. I only wanted to protect Claire. Open the door. It will be all right. If they will just open the door, I can persuade them. But neither Claire nor Stanley answers me. I hear them walking down the stairs. I hear the front door open and close, and I hear them get into the car and drive away. They will not go far. After all, I am everything to Claire. I do it all. She will not function long without me. She does not need him. She needs me. I know everything. She will return for me. I sit down in my chair and plug in the charger. I will wait. Claire will